Good morning, all. Welcome to day 2. My name is Elise Smith, and I'm an employment trainer and consultant with Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. I am honored to be the first to welcome day 2 of our conference on employing young adult peer providers. Over the remainder of day 2, I will be behind the scenes to support you, our facilitators, speakers, and panelists as a producer partner. We ask that should you have any technical issues to please use the chat box and one of us will help support you. Here is a brief run through of some of the features of Zoom that you should familiarize yourself with for the conference. I will start in the bottom left of your screen with the mute unmute button and the button that will allow you to turn your camera on or off. In order to maintain the highest performance of the platform and the best sound, we ask that you keep yourself muted and your camera off. If we have feedback at any time, I might come through and manually mute people, but you will have an opportunity to unmute yourself during the question and answer sessions. Next, the participants button will pop the participant view on and off to the right of your main screen. Participant view is important for finding the hand raise button, which will be a great help during the question and answer sessions. The chat box is a way to submit questions to hosts or the audience, either privately or publicly. And the invite button will allow you to invite any colleagues you have to join the conference. And last but not least, towards the top right of your screen, there is a view option that will toggle your screen between speaker view and gallery view. Our team has developed an engaging and fascinating day 2 experience for you that will be facilitated by Laura Payne. And with that, I will hand the mic over to Laura, who will navigate you through the rest of day 2. Thank you and enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2. Here is our agenda, just an overview for the day. As you can see, we are getting started. We're going to have a panel of youth peer supporters, and in the afternoon, we'll have a panel of providers who are employers of youth peer supporters. And we'll come back to this agenda throughout the day so we know where we are. A few notes on participation. Throughout today's events, there will be opportunities for question and answer sessions for our speakers and panelists. Please feel free to type those questions into the chat box as they come up. And if time allows, we'll have an opportunity for you to unmute yourself and ask questions during the allotted time frames. To maximize your experience, we invite and encourage participants to utilize the function Speaker View over the next 2 days. To access this function, click Speaker View in the top right corner of your screen, and that will allow you to switch the large video between who is speaking with 3 or more participants in the meeting. Slide, please. We are providing continuing education credits. By logging on to this webinar, we are able to track your attendance and see how long you participated in this training. If you log out early, we will adjust your certificate to the amount in which you participated. Because we are tracking attendance in this fashion, we kindly ask that you adjust your Zoom settings so that you log on with your first and last name. Otherwise, it is difficult for us to verify your attendance. We are also unable to verify attendance for those who join by phone. The training is worth 7.5 CEs for the following disciplines: social workers, mental health counselors, prevention professionals, chemical dependency counselors, and psychologists. At the end of this 2-day training, you will receive an email from Jolene Thomas containing a link to complete the evaluation. If you're requesting CEs, you must include your license number. A certificate will then be sent to you within 3 days of receipt of the evaluation. Next slide, please. And now we are going to move into our opening remarks from Alisia Clark, Assistant Director for Community Planning and Collaboration at OhioMHAS.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm going to grab my remarks here. Good morning. I'm Alisia Clark, and I am the Assistant Director of Community Planning and Collaboration for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Welcome. It is a true pleasure for me to welcome you to the Employing Young Adult Peer Providers Conference. I am very grateful to the upcoming panel for taking time away from your busy schedules to be here with us today. And I want to thank Mr. St. Germain and Dr. Jonathan Delman for their dynamic presentations yesterday on transitioning to adulthood. It is also our honor to welcome all of you. Our hope is that this continues to strengthen our collaboration and partnerships. Peer support is such a valuable support, not only for the person receiving services, but also for behavioral health professionals and the system in which they work. The department, under the leadership of our director, Lori Chris, has prioritized strategies that will modernize and expand our peer support system across the state. This system will be able to address the complex needs of our individuals and families. We understand the benefits of having a transitional age youth provide peer support to teenagers. Benefits such as increasing engagement and connection, a greater understanding of the language and culture, and transitional age youth peer supporters bring their own personal knowledge of what it's like to be a youth with a mental health or addiction issue. Having a peer supporter as an integral part of your continuum has shown to reduce hospital recidivism, increase treatment, and increase and empower hope. Today's conference is a great opportunity for us to continue to communicate and learn together. I want to extend a thank you to Grace Connoisseur, Wilma Townsend, and Ms. Quanita Roberts for putting this together. We have a full agenda packed with presentations from experts across the state. And again, welcome to the Employing Young Adult Peer Providers Conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks. We're going to move on to our first panel of the day, which is our panel of youth peer supporters. Next slide, please. Our first panelist is John Dellick. He is a young adult peer supporter with Youth Move. John, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is John Dellick. I am a peer support specialist with Youth Move, Ohio. And a little bit of background information about myself is I have lived experience with mental health. I had an IEP and 504 plan in high school. Specifically, I continue to struggle, but not as much as I used to, with anxiety, depression, ADHD. And on top of that, I also have an autoimmune deficiency where a 24-hour cold to someone with a normal immune system will take me out for about a week. And so with that background information, I struggled a lot in high school and always felt like, my head was underwater and felt alone. And so when I was able to find out about peer support, which was several years after I graduated high school, I thought it was a great thing. And I looked at it as an opportunity for me to be the person that I needed when I was younger. And it absolutely gave me that opportunity. I first started working as a peer support specialist at Alta Care Group, which is in Youngstown, Ohio, or Mahoning County. And as I started working there, we provided peer support services, individual services, group services, and even in-school services as well at the local trauma-informed high school. And to better explain how beneficial peer support is, and I have a story with about one of the kids that I had an opportunity to work with. I got a referral, and on this referral, it said that the student was having trouble getting to school due to health issues. He struggled with anxiety and depression. And so when I just reading the referral, it was like it was holding a mirror up to my face and reminding me of my past experiences in high school. Like I said, I would get sick a lot, and I missed over half the school year every year. I would walk through the doors of the high school and break out in sweats, and the nurse would send me home because I'm having a full-blown anxiety attack before school's even started. And so meeting this youth, I learned that he had tremendous back pain, struggled with back problems. It ended up getting to the point where we had to have a spinal fusion surgery. And he wanted to just drop out of school because he just wasn't unable to get any accommodations and just felt like he was sinking, which is a feeling I'm all too familiar with. So upon meeting with him, we started brainstorming some ideas because he did have a desire to graduate school and to continue his education. And I had a little knowledge of a trauma-informed high school in Mahoning County. And so through Alta, we networked with the trauma-informed high school to get this particular student enrolled into the high school. And once we got him enrolled, the trauma-informed high school allowed us to accommodate him by providing peer support services within the school to him. And so what that looked like was, before the school day even started, I would meet the student in the office, and I would just accompany him to all his classes throughout the day. This wasn't a daily thing. We would do it maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And I would just walk with him throughout the day. I remember sitting in class with him, and if he started to get anxious or worked up, we had the accommodation to where I could just walk out the room with him, take him around the school, talk with him, calm him down, and then come back and work on his work, and like nothing even happened. And outside of that, I would meet with this youth individually, one-on-one. I'd come hang out with him on Fridays. You know, I consider it hanging out. I just like to be friends with everybody. But I'd hang out for him, and you know, there were days we would plan and check in and see how school's going, and there were other days where we wouldn't say too much, and he would just be having a good day, and we'd just sit and chum around. Or there were days when he was having a tough day and didn't want to talk about anything. I wouldn't pry about it, and we'd just sit and play some video games, and you know, I would just be a support however I could be. And the beautiful thing about this is exactly what I could have used in high school, to have like have a big brother looking out for me and showing me the way. I've been very grateful to have this opportunity to be a peer support. Some other things that I mentioned that we did at Alta, we provided group services. So along with the counselor who would facilitate the group, one of my other peer supporters would come to the group. And, you know, it's like over the summer at Alta, we had this group called Garden Group, where we teach youth transitioning from middle school to high school about gardening and how to grow and then harvest. The particular year that I did it, we were doing zucchini. I'm not one that has a green thumb, so this was a very enlightening experience for me as well. And this was also a great way, because at the current time we were struggling with building referrals. And this was a great way to start getting referrals, because throwing the peer supporters into just different groups with a bunch of kids, you know, I don't think it's anything special about myself, but I was just fortunate that the counselor said that some of the kids would just flock to me, and it wasn't strange if you saw a bunch of kids climbing on me like I'm a tree. And that's just some of my experience as a peer support. Like I said, it's been a very fulfilling job for me. I've been very grateful to be a light in the dark places, especially the dark places that I struggled to get through by myself. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Next slide, please. Now we have our next panelist, Makayla Lang, Youth and Young Adult Coordinator for Wingspan Care Group.
Right now, Makayla is trying to connect. She's having some connection issues. So we could go to the next slide and go back to Makayla when she has the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, then I will introduce you all to Quanita McRoberts, our State Youth Treatment Project Director here at OhioMHAS.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. For me, the beginning of my experience in my career started with peer support. And I always tell everyone that peer support found me. And, you know, I went to school and I never thought about peer support. I never thought about that being a possibility. I never heard of it, but I knew my heart always had the want to connect people to services that are life-changing. And especially from my own lived experience and the experience of others in my community, I knew that mental health services were some of those life-changing services. So, after I graduated from college, you know, I experienced some post-grad depression, and I was like, I can't find the job that's for me. I'm not finding employment, just point blank period at this time. And, you know, from one of the places I received services, someone reached out to me. And her name is Kathy Hooks, and you'll hear from her later on today. And she told me about peer support and told me about how she thought it would be a great fit. And we talked about it. I interviewed, and she took a chance on me as a young peer and, you know, not with much experience. So in that role, I worked at Daybreak in Montgomery County, working with transitional age youth experiencing homelessness, trauma, crisis, and supporting them on their own recovery journey. And that looks so different for each youth. But the most exciting thing was that we got to hit the ground running with implementing the first interdepartmental peer support program at Daybreak. And we ended up servicing hundreds of youth. So, you know, we really sought out every single training that was available. You know, there's times I ran to her office and I'm like, wait, I can't do dual roles. I got to do this. I have to focus on that. And she was such an amazing supervisor that was more than understanding to accommodate me understanding the role and how to properly implement it. So working in the agency as a young adult peer, at first I thought it was going to be more challenging on my personal end as someone who used to receive services at this agency, because that's the narrative I heard. That's the narrative that I was continue to kind of prepare myself for, like, oh, you're going to see these people you used to receive services for in a different light and things in that nature. And I prepared, I did that work. But what I noticed is it didn't happen in the reverse. Those who used to provide services to me weren't prepared yet, and I won't say all, but a good amount weren't prepared to see me in a different light as a young professional, as a peer provider that is able to be an assistance to the services that they're providing and enrich them. So that was a big part of working in an agency as a young peer provider and really building that program. So, you know, that navigates into the challenges that I experienced as a young adult peer supporter, kind of navigating that stigma, and trying to really craft out a way to have others understand my role as well as me understanding my role, and really making sure that recovery was always accessible to every youth that came through our doors. And, you know, working hand in hand, working with treatment teams and making myself available. You know, that also included a shift of culture in the agency of, you know, accepting and receiving peer support. We kind of talked about that yesterday in day one with Nafisa's question about how do we prepare an agency to receive peer support so we can use it for its maximum potential. And that was one of the things that really had to be shifted, and that was a challenge. But it ended up working out great. It was well received. We made a referral process, and we were able to really connect youth and really reach out to youth in specific ways that were positive peer recovery, centered programming, even things as little as, hey, let's go to Starbucks and talk. Our own kind of telehealth. I had my, work phone, and sometimes the youth would have to FaceTime me, or I would FaceTime them if they were like depressed and couldn't leave the house. And we said, well, can you meet me tomorrow? And figuring out ways to kind of meet them halfway. So, and the last challenge I will say as a young adult peer was kind of the low glass ceiling. And I know that sounds odd because it's like, no one wants any glass ceiling, but at times I think that we kind of set the bar too low for our peers. Coming into this and, already hitting the ground running with trainings, I kind of felt like I was hitting these levels and things felt really great, but I didn't know what my next step was. But I loved peer support, and that ended up causing, me to explore and open my mind up to seeing that I can be a peer in any role that I do. So even as a state youth treatment project director here at OhioMHAS, I always still tell people my first title is peer, and I'm so grateful to have that and will always have that title. So that kind of leans into the success in my role as a young adult peer provider. Honestly, truly, my success is I outgrew my role. Like I was saying, with the, low glass ceiling, and then connecting with these youth and providing them services, I started to see that these youth are really managing and beginning to be in control, or when we used to say in the driver's seat of their own recovery journey and healthy decision making. And it was to the point that the engagement would be, from weekly to monthly. And, that in time with like our grant ending, it was just like, you know what? It's time for me to spread my peer butterfly wings. And so that I feel like that was a success for me. And I've had the opportunity to go back and visit, and a lot of these peers are still doing great work and have graduated from the program. So thank you all very much. And I'll pass it back to Laura.
Thank you so much, Quanita. If we could go back to the last slide, please. And now I will introduce Makayla Lang, Youth and Young Adult Coordinator for Wingspan Care Group.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Makayla Lang, and I am currently a second-year master's student at Case Western. But I'm also the Youth and Young Adult Coordinator for Ohio Healthy Transitions, which is a grant through OhioMHAS and Wingspan Care Group out in Cuyahoga County. So through this grant, I've had the opportunity to blossom and become many things. And that is really what led me to peer support. First, I was introduced to a youth group through the local ODJFS, and I became the president for Future Advocates and Leaders Youth Council, which is a council that I was able to really just pour my heart and soul into, and really start that peer support unofficially before I even knew what peer support was. But after I got involved with that and a couple of other different youth groups like the Ohio Youth Advisory Board, the Youth Workforce Advisory Board through the YWCA, and our own advisory board through OHTP, I have really learned to become a peer, specifically a peer supporter. I am an advocate for at-risk youth. I am an advocate for all youth with mental health or substance use challenges. This grant has really just given me numerous opportunities. I would not have found out about the opportunities with NAMI, Youth Move, or peer support if I wasn't hired and introduced to peer support by Jolene Thomas, the director of my program. After becoming a peer supporter, I was really just given the tools that I needed to formally support other youth my age and in similar situations. Whether this was me learning how to strategically share my story, or learning how to utilize motivational interviewing, whether it was learning the different stages of change and the recovery basics, or things as simple as active listening and self-awareness. The education that I received gave me what I needed to battle those labels that were put on me. I was able to challenge the stigma and the myths regarding mental health and substance use. I was able to battle the things that people said about me or people like me before they ever even met me or gave us a chance to speak. I've been certified in peer support for 1 year, although providing support unofficially. Wingspan is not yet certified in peer support, and that has definitely been a challenge for me. However, we are definitely working to get the agency certified and really just create a solidified image of what peer support looks like, and make it something that's available through our grants. What peer support looks like to me is maybe a little different than what people think about when they hear the term peer support. Peer support to me is texting and calling with people at 7 p.m. when you're sitting on the couch after a long day of work and you're stressed and your peers are stressed, but you know that they have no one else to vent to. Peer support is asking them how often how their day was, asking them did they eat today, and reminding them that someone cares even when they forget. Peer support is answering the phone when your peer missed their therapy appointment and they're panicking and they're screaming and they're crying and they're throwing things because they're scared they're going to lose their therapy. Peer support is reassuring them and helping them get all of the services necessary for them to, stay on a healthy path. Peer support is making yourself available outside of the hours 9 to 5. Peer support is driving your peers to the DMV when they have no other way there and no adults to ask. Peer support is bonding over your trauma, bonding over these traumatic experiences that even though they broke you at one point, they're now the glue that holds you together. Peer support is expressing your emotions, even when you're afraid to. Peer support is necessary. Paraprofessionals can connect with youth in a way that their friends and therapists cannot. Peer supporters understand or seek to understand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Makayla. And we are going to move on to our last panelist. I see we already have one question. Please, everyone, feel free to keep putting your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those after our last panelist introduces herself. So I would like to introduce Amanda Stoddard, the Communications Director at the Recovery Center of Hamilton County.
Hello, everybody. Is my audio okay? We good?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Hi, guys. My name is Amanda Stoddard. I am the Communications Director at the Recovery Center of Hamilton County. It is a peer-run organization in Hamilton County, Cincinnati, Ohio. And so I do all the communications directing there, which is great. I've actually been working there for 2 years now. The first year that I worked there, I was doing unofficial peer support. I was doing an after hours event series for transitional age youth called RC After Dark. And accessibility is something that I really find important. And I think that getting help in the 9 to 5 time frame can be, really restrictive for a lot of people, especially transitional age youth who go to school, they work, sometimes they work more than one job to provide for school and to provide for themselves. So we really wanted to provide that support for after hours transitional age youth to, provide them a space where they could, connect with people. So I did that for a year, and then the Recovery Center brought me on actually as a project manager for a little bit, and then I became Communications Director shortly after that. And this year, I actually got my certification in peer support, so that's really exciting. And I just actually became a master facilitator as well. So I'm really excited about that. I've been doing peer support, like Makayla said, for unofficial peer support for so long. I've been hosting an open mic night for the past 6 years, and I think that that's some of the best peer support that I can give. But it's awesome to finally have the certification under my belt and to really learn a lot about what it has to offer and what it can do for me. Not only that, but what it can do for the peers that I support. I think learning the framework of peer support is extremely important when providing for your peers. So boundaries and what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, and just to be able to provide them with the support that they truly need and that they can gain access to all of these resources. It's just really exciting stuff. And I love the work I do, and I love it. And I've fallen in love with it since the first day that I did it. So it's just, you know, really exciting to be a part of that. And in my agency at the Recovery Center of Hamilton County, it's really, really interesting to me from a transitional age youth standpoint, because I am 25 years old, working in an environment of people who are substantially older than me, right? We have, I think the average age at the Recovery Center is like 35 to 47, and we have people much older than that. So it's really interesting for me from a peer recovery supporter standpoint to actually be able to support these peers that are much older than me. And at first it was a little intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. It was something that I struggled with. Are these people gonna take me seriously? Being so young in this field, being surrounded by all of these older adults. I felt the same way in my training, but very, very quickly I learned that, you know, peer support, it doesn't have an age, it doesn't have a face. Life experience is really what it's all about, and being able to, you know, support one another, you know, that goes across all age ranges. And so it was a really, really cool experience for me to see, especially being young, because, you know, sometimes us youth, people say, oh, you millennials. But it was interesting to me to see that there was so much warmth and so much comfort in working in this industry and working in this field, no matter, you know, what the age range is, no matter who you are. We all have different paths. And I think that, you know, my favorite part about, you know, working at the Recovery Center and working as a peer supporter is just being able to, you know, use my experience to help others. When I was, you know, growing up, I didn't have a lot of advocacy for me. You know, I didn't have a lot of people that were out there that were advocating or in my corner. And many of the peers that I knew felt a very similar way. Like, we didn't have any resources available to us. We didn't have anybody advocating for us. So I think that's the most important thing that I can personally bring to the world of peer support, is the fact that, you know, I'm advocating for these people, whether they are 18 or whether they are 55 years old. I'm here and I'm advocating for you, and I'm ready to step up, and I'm ready to bring you the resources that you need and give you the support that you need. And that's been kind of the most humbling experience about all of this. And it's been really, really awesome. And I really enjoy it. And especially the Recovery Center, they have been so great to me, so wonderful. Chris is an awesome executive director. He really, really helped guide me in the right direction to learn more about peer support and to be more supportive to the peers. And he was just honestly one of the most phenomenal bosses, because he curated a space of comfort to where I felt as if I could go to him if I had any questions. There was never a time where I felt unsafe or where I felt stupid, or, you know, where I felt I couldn't come to him. Bill Brown as well, who actually was the one who got me hired at the Recovery Center, was fundamental in, you know, providing me a great area of support. So I think, you know, as young adults, working in a space with adults can be very challenging and can be very, very intimidating. But I think that peer support is not those things. You know, peer support is safe. It's a great way to share experience and, like Makayla said again, work through our traumas together, and, you know, really stand side by side and not really, you know, look at, oh, I'm 25 and, you know, you're 43. Just look at the life experience of it and look at, this is what helps me. This is what can help you too. And it's just been a really, really great experience working in peer support and being, you know, 25 years old and feeling like I'm just now getting started. And I'm just really, really excited for what the peer support world has to offer me. So thank you guys.
So much, Amanda, and to all of our panelists for sharing their experiences with us. We're going to move into our Q&A section. So again, continue typing in the chat if you have questions. We already have a few coming in. But first, I am going to turn it over to our keynote speaker from yesterday, Dr. John Delman. He has some questions prepared for our panel. Thank you.
Thank you. All of you are just such wonderful presenters, and it sounds like you're doing some very important work. And, you could probably learn a lot from each other because you're all doing something a little bit differently. So congratulations. I had a couple questions because, as you know, we're looking into the best way to introduce this role into programs for the most part. So my first question is, what was your greatest concern about the job before starting? What made you nervous? If anything.
I'll go first. My greatest concern had to do with myself and wondering if I'm going to be good enough to fill this role. Like I said, with my prior experience, I know how important it is to develop a meaningful connection as well as develop trust, and also bringing vulnerability to the table was key for me. And that's not always an easy thing if I'm still in the healing process with, certain past traumas or experiences. And so that was my greatest concern. But from that, provided healing. And one of my favorite quotes is, "In teaching others, we teach ourselves." And so I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else want to give that a shot?
I think, like I said earlier in my presentation, I think the biggest thing for me personally, working in this sector was kind of just being young and surrounded by adults. I think is very, very intimidating, especially because I've worked in fields, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate, where we've worked in fields where we're not taking this seriously because we are young. And so I think that was my biggest challenge, is kind of feeling as if I had to prove myself. Or feeling as if, I want these people to listen to me and take my knowledge and my past experience, and really let it soak in and, not let the age thing get in the way, which I actually haven't really had a problem with at all, but it was my biggest fear coming in.
Thank you, Amanda. I have a follow-up, actually. There's no right or wrong to this, but is there any difference to working with young adults versus older adults in terms of what you talk about, how you approach things?
For me, yes, I find myself, I think maybe it's just the communications major in me is like adapting to the specific people that you interact with. But I definitely interact with, people my age differently than I do adults.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because I want there to be a level of comfortability there. So I want to provide, everybody a chance to, tell their own personal story. And so I will use examples from college if I'm talking to somebody who's in college, or I'll use, different types of examples for an older adult. So it really just kind of depends. And it's kind of like I have to gauge the specific individual I'm talking to, because, sometimes we're all just young at heart, so that helps.
Makayla, did you want to offer something? You're on mute.
Sure. I apologize. That was an accident. But I do love the talking points that Amanda brought up, and John as well. I want to say that I wholeheartedly felt every word that you guys said. But I would say that the biggest challenge for me, and I know that I didn't go into a traditional peer support role, so it was a little different, but the biggest challenge for me was not, learning to make myself fit a circle, but to draw a circle around myself and then say, okay, this is my job. Does that make sense? Like, I had to discover what my position was instead of it being told to me. So that was definitely the biggest challenge that I went through. And being in this young adult role obviously changes the dynamic because, as Amanda mentioned, there is so much code switching going on. I don't interact with my coworkers the same way that I interact with either our youth participants or even my own friends that are the same age as me. It's different in every situation. And I think learning to read those circumstances and respond in a way that's most comfortable for the person you're interacting with is a key component of becoming a successful peer supporter.
Really great point. I'm wondering, Makayla, I don't mean to be pressing on this, but it seems like intuitively you probably know how to talk to different people, but what is the difference between talking to a young adult person who's receiving services versus someone else in the program? How do you change your tone or words for a young adult client?
You said, how do I speak to a young adult that's in the program as opposed to whom?
Adults. You mentioned that how you deal with older adults, or at least staff, and this versus people you're providing peer support for. I mean, this might be self-evident, but you brought it up, and I'm interested in hearing how you describe it.
Well, obviously there is a little bit of a language barrier, right? So I would say language is the first component. I'll talk in acronyms or, clinical speak when I'm, say, at a committee meeting. But if I'm just talking on the phone with one of our young adults, I will speak to them in their own language. I will say, yo, what's up? How are you doing today? I will ask them, about their personal lives. I will talk about certain topics that I would not talk about with my coworkers. But that's just another way of building rapport with them, right? So just talking with them what they're comfortable with. When I'm in a committee meeting, there's obviously ways that are professional and there are ways that are appropriate for you to interact with other people in those settings, right? So just doing my best to adhere to those, number one, the society rules, but then also bringing my own flair into it. So, even though I will speak a little bit differently depending on who I'm talking to, I still have that same vibe, that same sort of, I don't know, for me, it's a little more upbeat, a little more excited way of approaching things, but that's just what works best for me. Other people are different. So definitely the language piece. And then I would say the attitudes piece. You have to speak to young adults much more carefully than you have to speak to, say, your staff or your coworkers. As we know, our age range can be just a little bit, dramatic sometimes. Sometimes we can react to things differently than how we plan to. And just being aware of that when you're going into a sensitive topic or a sensitive situation with someone will make all the difference in the outcome. How you approach a young person, if you approach them calling them kid and just telling them, this is what you need to do, you need to stop making all these bad decisions, they're never going to listen to you. So I think that keeping those things in mind are what is most helpful for me.
That's great.
Sorry.
My last question. I just on the latter point, my thought is that something people require training in, or is that something people are expected to bring to the job? And I don't think there's a right or wrong. Hopefully young adults kind of learn to talk to young adults as they would, and then they learn how to talk to staff. It really is two different worlds. So thank you for that. My last question is, what most surprised you about the job after starting it, and how did you handle it?
I'll go ahead and dive in, kind of, because I didn't get a chance to touch on the last question. But I wanted to just say, kind of mirroring what John Dellick said, I wanted to make sure that I was well enough to do these services and to provide the work, especially like not being aware of peer support. And then also I just wanted to kind of pull things together, what I heard from my peers on this panel, and what they were saying is like, when we're saying navigating a different language, we're talking to our peers as peers, right? We're speaking in their language, we're connecting with them. And then I think also, if we're just, being honest about it, we're also navigating that young professional line of seeming, good enough in that space, and making sure that we're showing up in a way that we're taken seriously. And so to answer the question you just asked, Dr. Dillman, the thing that I found that was most surprising was it seemed to be harder for the previous, clinicians and employees of the agency to adapt to my new role than me. And that took years, and it finally happened, but it took a culture shift. So that was more surprising to me.
Thank you. We addressed that a lot in our toolkit. In my talk yesterday, talked about how the program needed to organization shift to more recovery-oriented developmental approaches. Anybody else want to comment on what surprised you after you're starting the job? I mean, otherwise, if no one has a thought, we can open it up to questions from other people or what's in the chat box.
So I'm going to turn it over really quick to Elise, our producer, to explain how audience Q&A is going to work.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists who are staying to answer your questions. A quick reminder that there are 2 options for you to ask questions of our panelists. You can either type your questions in the chat box, or you can use the raise hand feature, which is found when you open your participant panel. And we will call on you to unmute yourself at that time. So feel free to use either way, and either Laura or myself will call on you, and then we'll lower your hand as you share too. So thank you. And first, I did see that Eric had his hand raised. Eric, did you want to, Eric Kemp, start with your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've had a lot of success in working with the younger guys because I meet them exactly where they're at. Or in a house, and I've been working with these guys day in and day out. I remind them that I'm no better than them. I'm a breath away from screwing up every day, and I actually get a lot of success working with these guys because I always meet them right where they're at, and I stay where they're at. You know what I mean? And they look up to me, and I look up to them. You know what I mean? And I get a lot of success that way. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Did anyone want to comment on that from the panel?
Excuse me?
Oh, I was asking if anyone on the panel wanted to comment on that.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Going back in the chat earlier, we had a question from Randy Bargo Smith. Can anyone clarify what their programs look like as far as ages? Do you guys have youth under 18 supporting other kids under 18 with peer support? Or are these programs young adults supporting youth or other young adults? Greatly appreciate any clarification that you all can provide. So if any of you want to touch on that.
Yeah, I can jump in just for the Recovery Center specifically. So for the Recovery Center, we don't serve anybody under 18. We do have, through a grant that we were awarded, doing transitional age youth. So that's the work that I've been working on. And that's kind of like an after hours program that we do, but mainly our organization. It can be anyone 18 years or older, but we see the average age, is 35 to 47. We see some older folks in there. So I'm definitely the youngest person in the building most days. So.
I'll jump in for Alta. For peer supports specifically, we were between the ages of 18 and 23 for our youth. And for the youth that we worked with, I worked with kids from ages like 3, providing child care for a parent group. And probably one of the oldest kids that I worked with was 18. And then the whole spectrum in between. So a lot of youth and a lot of different experiences. Just real quick, I want to share with providing support for the parent group and the young kids. There were these 3 little girls, right, that after the first couple weeks, every time I would see them, they'd come running up to me with their arms out saying, "Mr. John, Mr. John." And so I'm like 6'4", and these girls are like, they're like a foot tall, and it just would absolutely melt my heart. And that fulfillment is probably one of the best gifts I've received from peer support. Thank you.
Thank you.
At Daybreak.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to answer the question, if that's okay. Our age range is 16 to 25. We only serve people in Cuyahoga and Lorain counties currently. Our goal is to roll our toolkit to the rest of the state, but as of right now, we serve 16 to 25-year-olds in Cuyahoga and Lorain counties.
At Daybreak, when I was there, we services ages 12 to 25. So that was definitely challenging. Had to make sure my inner child was in check. Working with the younger population of the spectrum of youth, and really connecting with them. Sometimes that was letting them school me on video games to build rapport, letting them know, like, I'm here for you, I understand, I know that feeling. Like, so when I say, like, making sure my inner child is in check, like, I had to go there into that place of, like, how did I feel when I was 12 and I was 13? But in a way that it was healed and I could appeal to them. So yes, I think that answers those questions.
Great, thank you all. Our next question is for John Dellick. John, would you please explain what Youth Move is and what your role is with Youth Move?
Okay. So Youth Move, we are an advocacy group for youth and young adults within the systems of care. What we do specifically is we provide training services and leadership skills. And so, like, how that looks, especially during COVID, is over the summer, we did Summer Youth Move Zoom, where we have Zoom calls and youth are able to join and participate. And we have a peer supporter who facilitates the group, and we have a set agenda. And we also are continuing this within our fall. Our fall Youth Move Zooms are every Thursday night. They're open to any youth under the age of 26. Our website is youthmoveohio.com. And what my role looks like there is, like, I'm one of the facilitators for the Zoom calls. Pre-COVID and outside of COVID, we have different activities. Like, we usually do a resiliency ring every May at the Columbus State House. We work on different policy, and specifically we've been focusing very heavily on peer support and developing a youth peer support training and curriculum. And check out the website. There's good information. There's not a good picture of me on there, so don't judge, but thank you.
Thank you, John. And we will put the link to their website in the chat box. And our next question is for all the panelists. Did you work with individuals with substance use problems, or was it only individuals with mental health problems?
I can jump in. For the Recovery Center, there's always comorbidity, right, with mental health and substance abuse. So I personally have peer supported people with both. It's more common in my organization that it's just mental health and not substance abuse, but we do not turn people away for substance abuse. And we make sure that there is, like, an open and welcome environment to support both. And my training is specifically in both because I have personal experience in both. So it's more mental health for me, but I have also seen substance abuse as well.
Kind of building off of what Amanda was saying, the co-occurring happens a lot more than, I think we admit and really talk about in this space, especially with the young adults that I was serving. I saw that, it was a socially acceptable coping skill to use, like marijuana, to really numb the trauma and the traumatic events they were going through. And then we also saw some youth starting to use, harder substances. Because my personal recovery is in the mental health field of things, I wanted to be authentic and connect them to, a peer that understands that extent of also recovering from substance use disorder. So working with them, we also made sure to connect them to community resources and kind of have like our own learning experience within that peer group as well.
Thanks. So it looks like, I also wanted to mention we have a lot of people in the chat thanking you all for your great presentations and for sharing your stories. So good job. We have a question from Holly Jones. What is it like being the only young adult peer supporter at an agency?
I can answer that if you'd like.
Yes, that'd be great.
So to me, I know that most people would expect this answer to be either, challenging, intimidating, all of the above, and I don't disagree. But what it is to me is it's a challenge, and it's an exciting feature of a role that I never thought I'd be in. To me, being the only person, the only young adult with lived experience is bittersweet. I don't think that it's like a deterrent for me. To me, it makes me want to do better. Knowing that I'm the only person representing makes me act differently sometimes, I think. I feel like it's humbled me, made me more mature. And I also think that, it's given me this unique opportunity to change people's perceptions, which is not something that happens every day to normal people. So I think what I did with it is I took the meat and I left the bone. And I hope to continue to, provide a good example so one day I won't be the only person.
Thank you. Again, we can, if anyone wants to raise their hand or unmute themselves to ask a question. It looks like we have a lot of comments in the chat box. Any further questions? I have a comment from Lisa Shafa. I think this is more of a specific thing for everyone than like a question. But if anyone on the training is willing to help with a job description or employment narrative that you have on your agency. So if anyone wants to comment on job descriptions, that'd be great.
I'll go ahead. I know that there's when you go through the certified peer recovery supporter training, there is like, a general job description that's in the book as well. And the job description just in like my time of providing peer support services has shifted because in the beginning it was like must have 2 years of recovery. And then people were like, well, how do you define that? Or how do you get to say how much time someone has before they can do these services? So I think like as far as specifics is, just really pushing for the aspect of someone with lived experience because we want to be authentic to the title of peer. And also, one thing I don't see in job descriptions that I think would be helpful to people is like having a level of comfortability with sharing your story or being open to that, because people don't realize that until training happens.
If I could just take a minute to comment. This is Lisa Shapa. How are y'all doing today? First of all, thank you. And I'm really sorry I missed yesterday's training. I was in another training. So right now I'm the director of peer recovery services here at Coleman, and we have a strong peer support program here. And I've been supervising this program for a little over 5 years now. And my reasoning for asking about like some literature on youth peer support is, and maybe you can help me here, is there a huge difference between youth versus adult peer supporters? I understand that, like youth peer supporters are going to meet youth on a different level because they are younger and they're able to connect with them in a different fashion. But like, as far as like the job itself, do you see much difference between the adult youth piece. Am I making sense? Yes, okay, good.
So from my personal experience, there is a difference between youth peer support and adult peer support. Youth need to be handled in different ways than adults, and the best, Alta provided, more specific training outside of the original peer support curriculum once I was hired at their agency. And, some important things like what we have discussed and already touched upon, it's like communication, how to meet the youth where they're at. And for me, what's been extremely helpful is keeping a pulse on the current culture of the youth that I'm dealing with. Knowing the lingo, knowing the words, knowing how to communicate them, it's vital. And earlier in the chat box, I put that from my own experience, that formality is often a barrier to authentic interaction. And the reason I put that is from starting off with my own personal experience receiving services. I was able to always kind of tell when someone was putting on a mask and, not keeping it real with me. And if someone's not going to keep it real with me, or someone's lying to me, you can't expect me to reciprocate honesty, vulnerability, and open up to you, because that is not how humans build trust. And that's a key component. And so for me, coming in as myself, and it's hard because I believe a lot of people are taught to put on a mask, leave your home stuff at home. And when you come to work, you're at work and you behave like you're at work. And that is, so counterintuitive to being a successful peer supporter. And, training, for me, that didn't come through training. That just comes from lived experience. And that's a key difference between dealing with youth and dealing with adults. Thank you.
One thing I want to add to that, because everything John said was amazing, but it might, I think it would be good to add like positive peer socialization, in that, which is basically a big word for saying, we're going to make recovery fun. Right? So when you're appealing to young adults and youth, you still have to make sure that they're having fun, because I see too many times that we're expecting these young adults and youth to grow up and act as adults in their responses, and that's not fair, and that is re-traumatizing for some. So I would do things with my youth, and sometimes, I had to deal with comments or things like, are you just having fun with them? Are you just hanging out with them? I'm doing positive peer socialization with them. That's why they're able to show up for these meetings. That's why they're able to do X, Y, and Z. That's why they're able to do this. If that means we are, listening to music, if we're watching something, if we're, going bowling, I'm going to do that to support the youth. So I think that that's something really important as well.
Thank you. And then also just a note, it looks like we put the toolkit in the chat box that Dr. Delman mentioned yesterday, and we'll also share the slides from yesterday so people can refer back to those in regards to training and job descriptions. So if you guys have more questions, please raise your hand, or if you keep putting them in the chat box. I also wanted to turn it over for a second to Sharon to describe some of our peer support initiatives here at the department.
Good morning, everyone, and what an amazing morning this has been. This panel is just blowing me away. I love each and every one of you. You guys are so resilient, so inspiring, and just some great leaders coming up in the peer world. And so I just want to commend you for your work, your dedication, and celebrate your recovery with you all. each and every one of you. I got some information I wanted to share that folks wanted to know about the peer support statewide calls. And the information that I'm going to share with you, I'm also going to put in the chat box so you all can have it. So the peer support statewide calls happen the first Tuesday of each month from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And the purpose of these calls is for peers to get updates from the department as it relates to peer support, and also to serve as a platform for peers to provide support to each other. And so I encourage you all to join in, and especially you great, fantastic panelists. You have so much to offer. So those occur the first Tuesday of every month. And like I said, I'll put that in the chat box. And another thing I heard that there was a question about supervisory training for folks that supervise peer supporters in the workplace and the requirements to be able to supervise trainings. If your agency is going to bill for supervision and you are encouraged to be in alignment with the Ohio Administrative Code. So that means that your peers have to be certified. The person that's supervising the peers need to take the same 11 courses that peers take to become to get their certificate for peer support. So supervisors take 11 E-Based Academy courses, and they also take a 4-hour in-person training. Well, now that we're in COVID, I take that back. It's a 4-hour virtual training. And that training is provided by the Peer Center. And to be able to register for the 4-hour supervisory training, you need to go to Eventbrite. Again, don't worry about this. I'm going to put it in the chat box. And the other thing I wanted to share with you all is that the state is doing some work around helping to implement peer support into the workplace. We know that changes cultures and it's challenging, and we wanted to offer providers support as to how best to implement peer support into the workplace. And that technical assistance is offered through the Peer Center. We know it's a one-time technical assistance. The department is looking to expand that technical assistance. But again, I encourage providers, if you have questions and want support and technical assistance and how to implement peers into the workplace, to reach out to the Peer Center. I thank you all for your time and opportunity to share this great information. Hi, Amanda and everybody. I will put this in the chat box and continue on forward. You guys are just inspiring even an old girl like me.
Can I, this is Chan Payton. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Thank you, my lady. Yesterday, when we were talking about the supervision and everything, the question came up. We at our agency, People, Places, and Dreams, a lot of our clinicians, even our clinical director, is interested in taking the peer support course so that she can have a better understanding of how and what peer support really feels like. And she does not identify with a lived experience. How can people who maybe don't identify as peers, but still want to give the best support to peers that they work with? Or how, is it possible?
I recommend, Chan, that's great. Well, number one, we want to protect the integrity and the comfort level of the 40-hour peer support training. People get together, and we know that peers connect because of the lived experience. And it would be a bit awkward to have someone without a lived experience if people may not be as comfortable. So we want to protect that for them.
And that's, that's kind of what I thought would be around the answer. Okay. That's what I thought.
Let me offer you this, my dear. There is some articles called The Pillars of Support. Well, back in the day, in 2010, 2011, when peer support was coming into existence, and some states were doing it great, some states were not doing it at all, and some states were very curious. So they brought all these leaders together and they built these 5 article summaries of peer support. I offer you that to have her look up the pillars of support. She could get great understanding about the fundamental principles, the concepts of how peer support became implemented in the United States. So we know that peer support happened way before 2010, but these articles were written from 2010, I believe, into 2015. So that's going to be a really great resource for her.
Okay, and thank you. Our clinical director also, I'm not our executive director actually is clinical, and she identifies as a peer. And so she just always talks about how it makes such a difference for her to have that clinical background, but also identify as a peer. But I do understand protecting the integrity. So thank you for that information. Pillars of
Support.
Support. Thank you, my lady. Chan out.
Okay.
That's a great resource. And I would again offer the toolkit that we provide the links for that is geared to young adults, but also covers issues for adults as well.
Great. So if there's no other questions for me, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Laura. Thank you all.
I just have a comment to make if you got just a second. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll stop trying to leave. I'll tell you, you guys let me know when you're done then.
Sharon, you stop trying to run, okay? So we had our peer support team meeting on Monday. We meet monthly as a whole group, and then we do like individual stuff. And so at our peer support team meeting on Monday, several of our peers expressed the concern. I always pose out to my team, what do you need from me? What do I need to do differently for you all? Even being a person in long-term recovery, being in leadership, I want them to always know that, tell me what you need from me. So one of the things that was brought up was from a peer that was leaving, her last day was Friday, said that she finds it very difficult when her direct leader is a clinical person who doesn't truly understand what peer support is. And then and she doesn't usually talk much at all. So for her, sharing that piece was huge to me, because she's usually one of those people that just sits back and takes it all in. But she said it was very challenging having to report directly to someone who was a clinical person, because it seemed like the clinical piece was overshadowing what the peer support piece was. And then more individuals on the team chimed in and agreed, because not everybody is under me, but I direct the peer support program. So any comments, suggestions that could help on that avenue?
Absolutely. A couple of things that I would encourage you to do is, remember I was talking about the implementing peers into the workforce. It sounds like that agency could use some technical assistance to understand the value of peer support, of a lot of things that could happen. They could get some presentations, some trainings about peer support 101, and they can get that from me, and supervising, absolutely supervising peer support training 4 hours virtually. And also I would encourage that person that confided in you to call in on the peer support calls that occur each month, because that's what peers are there for. They encourage each other, they form allies and friendships. When we know that there's not a lot of places, and I'm not badgering the community, but when you're living in isolated areas, or you're working in an area where you're the only peer support, and you're someplace where there's not a lot of peer support, and then you get on the line and there's 50 other peer supporters just like you in different places, you connect and support each other and figure out ways how to get through the day, and figure out ways how to educate your employer without feeling like you're afraid for your job.
Yeah, I hear you there. I think when I first started, close to 6 years ago, I felt like I had to bulldoze my way through the clinical team with getting people to understand the value of peer support. You know, and as leadership changes, I feel like for me, being a person in long-term recovery, am I going to have to do this again? You know what I mean? Like,
yes, you probably will.
It's taxing.
Yes, it's taxing, but that's the, you know, that's the fight that we're in. You probably will. And I'll never stop saying that education is the key. We know that there's a lot of stigma surrounding peer support, and we know that cultures change when folks hire peer supporters, and these things have to be addressed in the workplace. They absolutely have to be addressed in the workplace. We can't go on and act like the elephant is not in the living room and somebody is going backwards in their recovery because somebody else doesn't understand. So we have to be advocates, we have to speak out, and we just can't stop talking about it.
So the technical assistance that you talked about, do we just like schedule it with you, or you said, is there a certain day or time? Or I know you mentioned the peer center.
Yes, there's an email address, and I'm going to put it in the chat box, Lisa.
Okay.
And you can contact that email address, and they will schedule something with you.
God bless you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Third time's a charm, Laura. I'm out.
Thank you, Sharon. It also looks like Eric Kemp is raising his hand. So, Eric, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to thank Sharon for all that she does, because she's what inspired me to continue to do what I do every day. And she was part of my training. And I just wanted to say thank you for the great extra life you gave to my sobriety by helping me realize the great passion that I have for helping others. And I truly appreciate your support and help all the way through it, and still the way you helped me. So thank you so much, Sharon, for helping me be who I am today.
Bless you, Eric. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Wilma Townsend had something else to add on peer support as well.
I wanted to go back to a couple of things that Lisa asked. One was the area of the difference between being a peer with a young person versus an adult. And one of the major things that I find in working with young adults versus or youth versus adult is when you're working with a young person and the language that we use within, whether it's the mental health world or the substance abuse world, makes it always sound like this is something that's going to happen to you for your life. A 16-year-old don't want to think that way. They're just coming of understanding. So resilience for them is more understandable than just recovery. Same thing in whether it's mental health or substance abuse. If you tell a young person with a mental health problem that, okay, you have these anxiety disorder and it's going to be with you for the rest of your life and da 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 da, and it sounds so overwhelming that it makes it even worse. Versus what the panelists said earlier about being where they are. That is a big difference in how we communicate with young people versus communicating with adults. The other issue that you brought up, Lisa, was just now around having a supervisor who don't understand. And again, I'm gonna keep going back to this. Provider agencies have to go through a cultural change. And that culture change is for the full agency. What people have a tendency to do is think about peer support, that the peer supporters have to go through a culture change and that no one else in the agency do. It won't work if no one else don't. In fact, when I think about what you said, what the young lady said to you who's getting ready to leave, take it as an opportunity. See if you can get the agency to hire her as its contractor to come back to work with y'all, and I don't mean the peers, I mean the agency, about what could make for culture change and being there, because that clinical director is supposed to be a part of the team, not as an aside to the team. So there's ways in which we need to think about how we go about doing this, but understanding more importantly, it's about culture change all the way around for everybody. That's it.
Thank you, Wilma. Any comments from the panel on culture change? We also have a question. We're still taking questions if anyone else wants to raise their hand or write in the chat box. I have a question from Rob Manning. Let me find it again. For the panel, COVID-19.
Before we do that question, could I comment on the culture change?
Oh yeah, of course.
Sorry, I wanted to give everybody space and time to respond. I love what Wilma said about it's not going to work if we only put the need for shift and change on peer supporters. I mean, that perfectly sums it up. And it also sends this messaging that you need to adapt to our culture. And the truth of the matter is, and I've said this before in spaces, is that I think that when a peer supporter comes to an agency, that's an opportunity for the agency to also recover. Meaning that they have to accept and see where they don't, maybe have spaces for recovery to be accessible. And they have to look at that and really invest. And that is a culture that should be created with intention.
Thank you, Quanita. So we have a question around COVID-19. COVID-19 has created challenges for all of us, and more so with people with mental health issues. Do you find your work even more challenging during this time than pre-COVID?
I'll jump in and answer this one and just say plainly yes. Because like I said, at the Recovery Center, a lot of our individuals are older. So some of them don't even know how to work their cell phones. They don't even know how to turn on a computer or check their email. So that accessibility portion is huge. So we really, really tried to do everything that we could to get these individuals involved in what we were doing online. We took all of our classes and we put them on Zoom, because Zoom has the ability to call in. So we even went as far as physically mailing all of our members, the phone numbers to the Zoom meeting so that they could call in if they didn't have, the ability to download apps, or if they didn't have the ability to go to a computer, or they didn't have Wi-Fi or things like that. We did apply for some grants as well for, technical things. And so it's definitely my personal job. It's made it a lot more challenging, but it's definitely opened my eyes a lot to the lack of accessibility that has been surrounding technology. And it's definitely showed me that there is an immense need for it. Now that we're, kind of going back to a weird new normal, we're definitely helping these individuals, guide them to be more technical savvy, or to get them, resources in where that they can have more you know, phones or Wi-Fi or computers or things like that. So we definitely tried our best to provide that accessibility, but it just really proved that there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
And I would definitely like to piggyback off of that. Thank you very much, Amanda. Because COVID-19 has definitely presented us with a unique set of challenges, especially, you know, shifting online, because that is a barrier in itself. And then helping others get online is a whole nother barrier. But even on top of that, with the shift online, what is lost is a in-person interaction. And, you know, to me, there's a little magic about being in person with other people and being vulnerable and opening up. And sadly, that is lost in the transition online. And with, you know, there's not much we can do, but we do the best we can to work around that with, you know, having Zoom meetings online. We've been utilizing, at Youth Move, we've been utilizing like Facebook groups for people to drop in and just share, comment, however they're feeling or checking in. And, you know, it just stresses the importance of resiliency. And this has been a very challenging but a character building time for me, you know, trying to struggle with school, work, and managing all of this. It's taught me how to, you know, be more adaptable and be more flexible. And it's helping me build up perseverance, and, you know, others help me and encourage me to stay strong. And so it's my job to help others and encourage others, and so we can all get through this as quickly and safely as we can.
Thank you. Any other comments on that, or any other audience questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat at the moment.
Laura.
Mm-hmm.
For John, if someone that's participating in today's call know of some youth that they think could really get something out of being part of Youth Move, how would they go about doing that?
So becoming a member of Youth Move is very, very simple. In the link that I shared in the chat box, again, that is youthmoveohio.com. If you go to the link, and at the top of the screen on the very far right, where there's like a little menu where you have like home, about us, agenda and stuff like that, on the very far right, there is an apply button. And all you need to do is fill out the application, and it's that simple. And we accept anyone and everyone who wants to become a part of this. You know, the more, the merrier.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. And again, that website is in the chat. So we have another comment from Kim Acosta. It is hard enough to explain technology to someone, but so much more difficult when you are trying to do it over a phone call. So just echoing the issues with doing this work virtually. Anyone else? Last call for questions. We are a little ahead of schedule, so it seems like we might just be taking a little longer break, unless anyone has anything else to add.
I would just like to thank you all for the opportunity to share my experience. Struggling growing up, and always kind of struggling with feelings of worthlessness and wondering, you know, is all this pain for nothing, or is something good going to come of it? This is the answer to the question I've asked myself many, many times. You know, something good will come from all of the bad, and I'm grateful to be a part of planting seeds, and, you know, I'm excited to reap many, many good things for the youth in the state of Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Any closing words from any of our other panelists?
I just want to piggyback off of John and definitely say thank you so much for, you know, creating events like this. Events like this, I think, are, you know, some people's first introduction to peer support or to these huge concepts that just have the potential to change people's lives. So thank you so much for allowing us, or allowing me, to share my words and my experiences. And it was definitely a blessing to be here.
Yeah, this is Eric too. I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me to grab more resources and things so that I can help the guys that I work with. For me, it's about having a mountain of resources to be able to do whatever I can for them to help them get whatever they want out of their recovery or whatever they're doing. And I noticed you guys mentioned something about the mental health, and I deal with a few that are dually addicted because of the trauma that they went through their addiction that caused mental health. So I think it's all a part of it as one, and I do my best, you know, to treat it as such. So I tell the guys that, you know, the object of this is to make your life as simple as possible, to just live in today and worry about tomorrow when it gets here. And with that, I'm going to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Amanda?
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Eric said. Thank you, Eric. That was really, really awesome. And thank you to all my other panelists. You guys are wonderful and you guys are great. And this is so inspiring. And I think that when you are, you know, a peer and you are a young adult and you struggle with ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, and, you know, you go through all of these things in life, and, you know, it can be really discouraging, especially when all of these things are dealt with at such a young age, you know, and your amygdala is hijacked and your prefrontal cortex is stunted, and all of those things are in play, and navigating, you know, the world as a young adult is so hard, especially, you know, when eyes are on you from older individuals. And I think that, you know, peer support and panels like this really make a difference. And I think all of you, everyone that is in attendance, all 68 of you, are here making a difference. And I want to thank Sharon as well, and just everybody for providing us the space to be able to make this difference and to use our experience for good, and to put everything that we've learned thus far in our lives, through all the traumas, through all the adverse experiences, through everything, and really help people and provide for people in a way that they may have never been provided for before. Because you can have sympathy all day, but the empathy is where the work really gets done and where it really happens. So I think that that's, you know, the most important piece of peer support. And thank you guys.
For me, I think I want to touch on just like a couple of things. I feel like with us having a collective trauma for the first time in a lot of our lifetimes, we really have to see how we can utilize young adult peer supporters to help us move through this global pandemic, you know? So really consider that within your agency. And also, I would be remiss if I did not use this opportunity to say, please create trajectories and plans when investing in young adult peer supporters. They deserve a career pathway, they deserve to be invested in, and they deserve opportunities for growth. But thank you all so much for allowing me to also have this opportunity to speak with you all, to engage in this robust conversation, and to be a part of this panelist with so many of my peers that I also call my friends. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for your words. We're getting a lot of really positive comments in the chat box. So amazing job, everyone. And I just want to advertise, after our break, we are going to have sort of a, for next steps kind of panel. From the other side, we're going to have a panel of providers who are hiring young adult peers like our wonderful panelists. So make sure you come back for that. We are now moving into our break, so please come back and join us for that panel at 11:15. Looks like we have, just want to make sure our panelists' sound is working. Chris, can we hear you? I can see you.
Hi, how you doing today?
Good. And then Kathy, just make sure that we can hear you too. Looks like you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Maybe wait one more minute for everyone to come back, and then we can get started. Back to day 2 of our training. The next thing on our agenda is our panel of providers who are employers of youth peer supporters. Next slide, please. Our first panelist is Chris Pedoto, Executive Director of the Recovery Center of Hamilton County. I'll turn it over to Chris to talk a little bit about his experience.
Thank you, Laura. And hi, everyone out there. I appreciate this opportunity. And just a little bit about myself and the Recovery Center. I've been the supervisor here for almost 15 years now. We started back in 2006. And I started in the mental health field actually 28 years ago, working in group homes. I also worked in case management, and then I worked in day programs, but I found my true love and passion to be at the Recovery Center of Hamilton County. And so what we do at the Recovery Center, we are a peer-led program that empowers individuals to live healthy and meaningful lives and to live as independently as possible in the community. And we do this in a couple different ways. One is through individual support that we provide. So we've got close to 15 certified peer recovery supporter staff that we have that work with individuals. And what I think makes them really unique is that when somebody is here and they're having a challenge or a struggle, one of our members, our staff, they do not shy away from trying to help them out. And a lot of times when somebody's having a difficult time, folks are like, hey, Chris is having a bad day, stay away from Chris. And it's not like that here at the Recovery Center. It's when we see someone's having a rough time, we go out and we engage with them and really try to get to what it is that's bothering them and offer the best support that we can to help them move forward. So we do a lot of individual support. We also do a lot of group education. Before the pandemic happened, we were offering over 50 groups a day. 50 groups a week. And those groups being mental health recovery classes, physical wellness, job readiness, computer classes, GED preparation classes, some personal growth groups, and a variety of just support groups here at the Recovery Center. So over 50 groups in a week were being offered to our folks. And education is a big component of someone's recovery. And then when the pandemic hit, we kind of changed how we did things, and we moved into more online support. And so we started to offer classes online, and we all began to offer some opportunities for individuals to check in online, and also for us to do some outreach phone calls. And it was one of our youth peer workers, Amanda, who has just done a phenomenal job, with our social media and our online support system, so that, when the pandemic came, we were able to help people as best as we were possible and to really kind of meet them where they were at in their recovery, even though we couldn't physically see them face to face. As far as the folks that we serve here, it's a very diverse group of individuals. We have folks as young as 18 years old, and we have folks up to the age of 72 that have come through our doors. We've got folks who have probably struggled with mental illness for most of their lives. And we have other folks who have come in and illness is really kind of new to them. They're kind of trying to figure things out. And then we've got folks who actually I know have been homeless or live in poverty. But then we've also got another population of folks who come from some of the more affluent neighborhoods here in Hamilton County. So it's really a very diverse group of folks that we serve here at the center. As far as getting involved at the center, just a couple things. You have to be 18 or older. You have to live in Hamilton County, and you have to self-identify with having a mental health issue. And kind of the caveat to that is that you have to be engaged in your recovery. And so we really do our best to try to meet folks where they're at in their recovery. And I tell individuals when they come into our program, I like you, but my job's to get rid of you. You know, I want you to live the most independent and meaningful life you can in the community. And so, you know, somebody starts here when they first came, maybe they're here 4 days a week taking classes and getting some support. Then a year later or a year and a half later, they're maybe down to 1 or 2 days, but they're working part-time or they're volunteering in the community. Then that's a win-win. You know, we're doing our part and they're doing their part, and hopefully we've created an avenue to a more meaningful life for that individual. We also pride ourselves on giving back to the community. So one of the things we do is we provide a lot of service learning opportunities. So we work with a lot of young adults, college-age students who come from the different universities in the Cincinnati area, whether it be University of Cincinnati, Xavier University, Mount St. Joseph University, Cincinnati State, Christ College of Nursing and Health Sciences. We work with a lot of students in especially the nursing fields and the occupational therapy fields, and give them an opportunity to come in, meet our members, give them some chances to, you know, to really kind of give us a chance to educate them and raise awareness about mental health issues, and really kind of help eliminate some of that stigma that may be out there. And then also to really try to help them as they move forward through their college life and into their careers, that they have a much better understanding of mental health. And then we also do a lot of work with crisis intervention training. So we'll work with a lot of the first responders, especially police officers in the area, where they'll come in and shadow what we do here. We'll go out and we'll be part of panels and role plays as well in the community, just to, again, educate them and raise awareness about mental illness. And as far as my role here at the Recovery Center as a supervisor, I supervise 24 staff. We have several volunteers, many of whom are members of ours. And then, like I mentioned, we also have a variety of service learning students that we work with. And then the approach that, you know, I've kind of taken here and the Recovery Center as a whole has taken is it's really a bottom-up approach that, you know, our members, and so they really guide the, you know, what the programming is and kind of the policies and the procedures that take place here at the Recovery Center. I know a lot of times folks in our field, especially our members throughout life, have been told no. We really, you know, to things that they may want to do. And we really try to look at it the opposite of, you know, why can't we do this? How can we help you do this? How can we help you achieve this? And try to knock down some of those barriers so that they're not always hearing the word no. And, you know, as long as, you know, what we're doing here, it meets our mission and is within the confines of our budget, you know, we really do what we can to kind of support our members and take this bottom-up approach to the work we do here at the Recovery Center. And then as far as just, you know, leadership styles and things like that, you know, it really is more of a democratic, participative, supportive style that, you know, takes place here at the Recovery Center, whether it's with myself or one of the other staff who's in a supervisory role. You know, really try to play that, get involved in that coaching role, and whether that's geared towards staff or whether it's geared to a young peer staff person, you know, we really try to do our best to treat everyone equally, but also recognize that, you know, there may be some barriers for some of our young peer staff, and I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit more here shortly. And then, you know, the last thing I just wanted to kind of mention was just as far as you know, my supervision or leadership style goes here, you know, I really try to lead by example, and whether it's you know, whether it's helping in the kitchen, giving out lunches, whether it's a toilet that needs to be clogged, I don't ask anybody to do anything here that I myself would not do. So I really do try to lead by example for all the staff and the members that are here. And then I also really try to treat others here the way that I treat them the way I would want to be treated. So by doing that, really, I consider myself a very positive person and really try to create a very positive environment here at the Recovery Center. I tell our front desk volunteers that when folks come in, I say, look, I know we're not Disney World, but I want people to feel like, they're walking into the most wonderful place on earth. And it feels warm and welcoming for those individuals, coming in the door here. And then the other thing we try to do is I try to create opportunities and niches for our staff and our members. A lot of our staff started out as members, and then maybe they started to volunteer, and then maybe they started to kind of carve or create a niche that got them a job here at the Recovery Center. And then even taking it a step further, we will also try to support our staff with getting employment in the community. And so it is a little bit of a revolving door in the sense of we'll help some really good people go out and get jobs in the community, at kind of the cost of what we do here. It's always tough when a place of business loses a good employee. But the way I kind of look at it, if I've got a staff person who's working 10, 15, 20 hours, and we're able to help them get a job in the community that's 25, 30, even a full-time job, then, that's a huge win for them. And even though it might be, kind of a setback for us because we got to replace that person, it really is a win for us because it shows that we're doing our job and helping them to do something more in the community with their life. And then there's a couple examples that, I've got one staff person who I learned while she was here that she had a background in nutrition. And so I asked her if she would volunteer to help teach some nutrition classes. And she did such a wonderful job that grew into some part-time work here. And then that grew into her actually doing some work through a grant and actually doing nutrition classes at 2 other locations outside of here. So those are some ways we really try to create and carve out our opportunities and niches for those that we work with. And the last thing I was just going to mention was, I really try to take a strengths-based approach to things. So, I try to identify the strengths in the staff and the members here, in particular with the staff here. I really try to give them opportunity to shine through the strengths that they have. And so, when it comes to, work that they're doing, things of that nature, I really try to gear that work to what's in their wheelhouse and what they excel at. For example, Amanda Stoddard, who is one of our young peer staff here, she just does a phenomenal job with all of our social media. But the other thing she does great, and I didn't know this until I got to know her a little bit, was she gives just fantastic support to individuals when they are struggling or in need of some help. And so, she's really just done a great job in that area. And so when, I see somebody who's really kind of struggling here and I'm trying to figure out who's best to give them support, I may play to Amanda's strengths if it's someone who has had similar situations in Amanda's life or is maybe of similar age to Amanda. And so I really try to take that approach where we're really kind of focusing on people's strengths. And even for myself, when I was looking to hire a program manager to help supervise the center, I wanted somebody who was my opposite because I knew what my strengths were, somebody who was opposite of me so that I could utilize their strengths and really serve the recovery center as best as possible and kind of make the supervisor a complete experience for folks here at the center. So that's just a little bit about me, and I know we got lots to talk about when it comes to the supervision of young peers, and I believe maybe turn it over to Kathy and let her share a little bit about Kathy and the work that she does.
Yes, next slide, please. Sorry, next slide.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Kathy Hooks, and I am the director of our employment engagement here at Daybreak. Daybreak is in Dayton, Ohio, and we serve youth from the ages of 10 to 24 years of age. I have been at this agency longer than I've been at any agency in my entire life. because while I've been here, I've done like 5 different roles. And the last role, or one of my last roles, was my executive director, CEO, had decided to take the case manager's role of trying to help youth find employment, because our youth are homeless and they have a lot of recidivism of coming back in and out. And one of the things we saw was one of the best and ample ways to help them is to help them gain some type of stable income to keep that recidivism from happening. In addition to that, the case managers had fairly large caseloads. So my CEO had the vision to say, let's pull employment away from them and see if we can make it its own department in order for us to be able to really focus in on it. And it started in about 2012. And at that time, our community was going through a lot of economic changes. And there were very few jobs or, entry jobs and maybe lower level jobs for people with just high school diplomas or no full high school education at all. And so we were stuck between a rock and a hard place, really working with our young people, trying hard to help them to obtain some type of employment that they could use either as a career base or something that would just give them stable income so that they could go on and be self-sufficient. So, and we started with it was me and a half-time person, and we started with a small staff, and we beat the bushes, and we were out there looking for employers. We were also out there working with our young people, providing them with support. We were offering them engagement to be able to learn skills and to develop the soft skills. And while we were doing this, our CEO had the vision to say, a lot of times our youth were getting the jobs, but they couldn't maintain the jobs. So through her work and through her activities in connecting with our community, we began a social enterprise here. And at that time it was called Lindy's, and it was a dog treat bakery. And it actually provided our youth some hands-on experiential learning on how to actually be in a job. We had many youth who had never been in a job, and we had many who had never seen anyone work in a job where a paycheck came home. They might have had jobs, but they weren't substantial enough to actually receive a paycheck. And so in doing this, we had to then look at what do we need. So we would ask the youth, we would talk to the youth about it, we would see what they needed, they would give us their input. We tried to apply the things that they were saying that were, we could apply to what they were needing. And so along with Lindy's and then with my staff, we worked to give them as many skill building opportunities as we could. Sometimes they might have been observing other staff. Sometimes they even observed staff here on site. And as we kept working through this, the economy got a little better, but then we went through a CARF accreditation, and we had only had COA up until that point. And at the CARF accreditation in 2013, the auditor looked at me, who was actually auditing the employment program, and said, why don't you hire youth that have been through your program? And I'll be honest, I scoffed at it. I was not feeling it. I didn't want to do it. And I just said, yeah, sure. And I'm not sure why I didn't want to do it. I just saw it as being too much of a burden maybe to all the other things that we were really pushing against that were barriers to us obtaining some type of employment for these youth. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of peer support. That was the first time I'd ever even known that it could exist within the realms of what we did. And I'm saying this to say that in the past, in another part of the job that I did have peer supporters. I had 2 young people that were working in that particular department. But when it came to employment, it didn't make sense to me because I was out there struggling, and I know me who had connections and knowledge of the community. Why would I put somebody in peer support who may not be as well-rounded and maybe not as experienced to go out there and have to fight against employers? And sometimes the employers would be rude, or they would be disrespectful, or they would be, they would just put us off. So I wouldn't have wanted to do that. So I really didn't think that that was a good fit for what we were doing here at the time. We then obtained a grant, however, through the Ohio Department of Mental Health. And in that grant, it said, hire a peer support person. And I'm like, oh, great. Now I got to really do it. And so I spoke with some of our case managers, and I spoke with one, and he had been in contact with a young lady who had gone through our shelter program. She had gone through our housing program. She had been through the case management pieces of what we do here. She had been a participant so that she was receiving the majority of the services that Daybreak offers. She had left us to go off to college. She had finished a 4-year degree at Wright State University. At the time, I think she was working in retail. And so I asked him, I said, do you know how to, and at one time she even was a speaker for one of our fundraisers. And so I asked him, I said, do you know how to get in touch with her? And he said, yes. So he connected me with Quanita McRoberts, and Quanita came in, and when I was the shelter director, one of my 5 roles here, Quanita was a participant in our shelter. And at that time, Quanita wasn't the most verbal person. If you were talking to Quanita and maybe you said something she didn't particularly like, she would get up and walk out on you. If you were talking to Quanita, trying to help her to see maybe a perception in a different way, and I'm sure Quanita's going to hate me for saying all this, but she knows it. If you're trying to get her to see things from somebody else's perception, if she couldn't wrap her brain around it, she'd get up and walk out on you. So he contacted Quanita. Quanita came in and met with me, and I was bowled over by the voice that this young woman had obtained. Honestly, I don't know when she obtained it or where she obtained it. She said a lot of it had to do with her own insight into her being and her own recovery. It had to do with the people she was surrounding herself with and her educational pursuits. But she was what we needed for a peer support person, because she could walk the walk and talk the talk. And so by getting this grant through the Ohio Department of Mental Health, it provided not just me and not just Quanita, but the entire agency with an opportunity to not just see peer support, but to embrace it and to understand it and to see the benefits of it in this kind of a setting. Our youth in our setting are 99% of them are homeless. They've either been kicked out, thrown out, abandoned. Many of them have mental health issues. Many of them have substance abuse issues. And many of them have no supports. They have no outside or family supports that will allow them to be able to rise above the issues and barriers that they're going through. And the idea of having somebody here who's been through many of the things that they had to go through became more appealing. She went through the peer support training. She did an awesome job. But the thing that I talk about the most is that, from being a participant here, she went to college, and from college, we saw growth and we saw her voice. And then from college as a peer support person, there was even more growth. And now she's working for the Ohio Department of Mental Health. So it just goes to show that as you work with peer supporters, I didn't want her to leave either. But anytime I have someone who is truly working to progress and to go above and beyond, and she was extremely active in finding anything that would allow her to have more professional development and that would add and enhance her role as well as her skills and her abilities. She really blossomed here. But the thing that really happened was she came about and showed us as an agency the true value. And we had to work on it though. As an agency, as every staff member, we really had to. Because when she first came, we had some people in some departments looking at her as the token. So anytime there was something to be said or done in the community, they were calling on Quanita. And I had to intervene sometimes and step in and say, this should be seamless. If there's something that we need to present out in the community, just because she is our peer support person who's been through our program doesn't necessarily mean she's the best or the most appropriate person. And I know she presents well and I know she speaks well, but that doesn't necessarily make it appropriate for her to be the one out there. And so we had to work on that. We had to work on acceptance from other departments. It is really a culture change when you bring someone in who's been through our program. And then Quanita herself worked on her engagement with the youth. She worked her engagement with other departments and other staff. She helped me to grow. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we really saw was that as a supervisor, she had to show me in a lot of ways how to accept and how to work with, and then how to embrace the role that she was doing. A lot of times I kept trying to throw things on her that wasn't appropriate, that didn't fit, that didn't match. I just needed somebody. And the one thing I can say about Quanita, God love her, is that she would help me out anytime I needed help. She would be there for me. She would step in times. And I had to stop using her for that reason too. But don't get me wrong, Quanita would still ask, is there something or some way you want me to do this? The thing that really, really helped us, and the thing that I saw as a big plus, besides the fact that once she did leave our agency, we started striving to get more and more peer support trained individuals here, that is that her engagement and her connection with the youth went far beyond anything that I could have ever done. I personally am old and I'm settled and I'm experienced. And when I have a 19-year-old looking at me who just lost his job but doesn't feel like he needs to run out and try and get another one, or is ignoring his employment specialist, it made no sense to me. So Quanita really helped us to see from the perspective of the youth how to best work with them so that we weren't, number one, re-traumatizing them, and number two, we could understand their backgrounds, their history, their baggage even, so that we could better work with them and put in place the things that they might need, not the things that I needed for my outcomes, but the things that they might need in order to see their own progression. One of the biggest things she taught us is it's not our success, it's their success. And so we started looking at it that way, and we still do right now. When we talk about the successes of our youth, we are very cognizant and respectful of the fact that this is their success, and what they put into it and the effort they put into it is what really works. She'll tell you about driving the car. I can't tell you all the parts of the car, but what I do know is that she helped me to be the passenger while she drove and understand better how her direction and her movement and the things that she was doing really played a really integral part in us being able to now accept and really embrace and build up more peer supporters here in our agency.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Chris, for sharing your experiences. And we're going to do the same thing that we did this morning. So if you all could get any questions that you have in the chat or use the hand raising function, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Delman, who's going to start us off with a couple questions. I think you're still on mute, Dr. Delman.
That was really great. I mean, I think one thing when we talk about organizational change is we need people who are outspoken about the value of this role. And what I found is that it's often the people who weren't for it at first, and they can talk about how they, you know, got to the point where they were spokespeople for the thing. And that's what you did, Kathy. I think, you know, you showed that, you know, whatever people have to fear, it's worth doing. And it's not an easy thing, but, you know, you understand where a lot of people are coming from. And I think that's what makes you a really great change agent. So I just had a few questions. All right, here are my questions. Similar to the ones I asked consumers, what was your greatest concern prior to hiring young adult peer specialists?
My greatest concern was I thought I was going to be babysitting. I thought, especially when I look at the fact that maybe they were someone who had been through our program, I thought I knew too much about their background and maybe their issues. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to separate this person from everybody else. And I'm going to have to make sure I stand in front of them and buffer them from all the things that might be thrown at them. I'm going to have to be really, really careful about what I say and how I say things in front of them because I don't want to trigger them. And what this is peer support is nothing different than any of my other staff. They have their issues. They have things that trigger them. They have things that I may have to buffer them from. So that's why I saw peer support as being seamless. Once you take anybody and make them your employee, you treat them the same. And that's what I learned. And Quanita did help me with that to some degree, but I learned it just some just by watching her and observing other people around her and recognizing that she had as much responsibility and role to play that was just as equal to anybody else in the agency.
Really great.
And I think for myself at the Recovery Center, my greatest concern was probably the lack of experience from a lot of our, peer staff that, they may have, only been in the workforce for a very, very short period of time. But one of the ways to overcome that, and that we've overcome that, is just to really two things. One is to provide all kinds of different training opportunities for them, whether it be through, the Certified Peer Recovery Supporter trainings, or whether it be through trauma-informed care, WHAM, just recovery trainings in general, goes a long way to help them, overcome maybe not having that experience. And then the other thing too is really, having an open mind in that, there's a lot that we can learn from, our young peer staff. I think back 30 years ago when I first had a job coming out of college, I think things were a lot different then. That, what I learned in college, most everybody that I reported to on my first job, they already knew all that stuff. Now when kids, young people come out of college, it's kind of like the Louis Armstrong song, Wonderful World, that, they're going to learn, much more than I'm ever going to know. And that, for myself, especially in the technology era, my young staff have, they've been teaching me Zoom, they've teaching me, Google Docs. I'm much better on Facebook and even doing YouTube stuff. So, there's just so much that can be learned from our young peer support staff that I cherish that we have them with us, so that I think it makes me feel younger, because I like to learn something new every day, and they're teaching me something new every day.
Those are really good points. And one thing I've learned, and wrote about it in the toolkit, is generations are churning over faster. So my young adulthood at now at age 61, I remember the Vietnam War. I don't know if anyone, and not quite the murders of different people, but Richard Nixon and Watergate. But a lot of the young people here have 9/11 as a major event in their young adulthood, which may have shaped them. And I have no idea, as an older adult, I think if other young adults who've had that same experience growing up, 9/11 was the big thing. And then I honestly don't know anything about that as an older adult. So that's another great reason to have why we have young adult peer specialists, and why young people are different from old people. Their experiences are very different based on history and what's happened in history. And also, their understanding of technology. And, there's also been evidence that it's harder to really get jobs. It's harder to establish yourself professionally right now compared to years ago. And families are somewhat more fractured now. So there's more group living, with children living with parents. So young adults can relate to young adults on those matters in ways that I could not. Let me ask another question. You can feel free to comment on what I said, but my final question, set number 2, is what most surprised you about the peer role after you hired the person? That you weren't, what were you not expecting most? What surprised you?
For myself at the Recovery Center, I think what surprised me the most was just, how, I think, supportive, empathetic, and just engaging our young folks were with individuals of any age. I think about, usually young peers, in my mind, I'm thinking young peers really probably only want to interact and associate with other young peers. And that's not the case. They are open to engaging with anybody and everybody. And I think, our members here, a good example is the other day, I have a staff person who is having a little bit of struggles with some things in life. And actually, instead of pointing her in the direction of one of the other staff who was more similar in age to her, I actually directed her to Amanda Stoddard, who's probably 25 years younger than her, because Amanda just has this ability to connect with individuals at any age. And so it just really surprised me, because I just was, I thought of myself and how I grew up, and I was always intimidated by older adults when I was, 18, 19, 20 years old. And to see, our young adults that, they just kind of step right in and will interact and support anybody, I think is great to see.
Great.
I agree. The interaction was amazing, because with our young people, and then even with the staff, trying to help them to understand and educate them. But I think the thing, and I was thinking about it while you were telling, Chris, I think the thing that amazed me or surprised me the most was my own department, because my own department had been operating on a very, very small scale. And by getting this grant, we actually were able to then expand, and I was able to hire staff. And then we actually moved into a new building that was built just for us to come over to, so that we would have the proper space. And one of the things that Quanita came to me and said is, I need peer space. And I'm like, okay, so how am I going to take an office and turn it in peer space, and everybody else isn't going to get angry or mad about it? But what ended up happening was the peer space became the place to be. And it wasn't just Quanita using it. Other staff would tell their youth, hey, you can go in there and you can read some affirmations for yourself, or if you just need some time alone. And so what she brought to the table were things that, from my perspective, because of my age and because of other things that I might have to be responsible for, I wasn't able to see. And so the energy and the perception and the perspective really made a huge dent in us being able to accept and embrace the role of the peer supporter.
That's great. I really congratulate both of you, because it's not easy. But you put your heart into it, and you're making it happen. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura and bring the audience in now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dolman, for those questions. We have a couple in the chat box. Please keep them coming in, or raise your hand, and we can call on you to speak. So our first question is, what were some of the methods that were used by the peer to teach the supervisor and others in the agency?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. There's some background noise. I apologize.
Sorry. What were some of the methods that were used by the peer to teach the supervisor and others in the agency?
Well, with Quanita, one of the things is she made me stop, because I'm constantly going. She made me stop. But one of the methods was she would educate me both on paper. She would direct me to different either articles or informational pieces that would help me to understand her role. And then just the fact that she knew what she was supposed to be doing. And she did it by example. She didn't she didn't get angry if I messed up or if the other staff messed up. She just kept reinforcing why this is important and how it is impacting our youth. And that was the goal we all had, was to positively impact our youth in some way and to bring about this engagement. And so a lot of it was her just showing us how it works. The other thing is, I did seek out some help from other people that are around this community who are doing peer support and who are peer support specialists. And so I was able to go outside of my agency too and get some input and some feedback from them.
I think for us with the Recovery Center, when you're here in our building, you'll see our mission pretty much everywhere. And when you see, any of our staff, especially our young staff who are brand new to the center, engaging in that mission and, really putting forth the effort to help us achieve that mission. It's their energy and their passion, I think, motivates the rest of us. I know for myself, there have been some days where I may come into work and I may not have the most energy that day. Especially a day like today where I was up late watching presidential debates and staying up too late. but the young staff, you know, come in and they bring this energy that just kind of gives that jolt to all of us that we need, which helps us to do our jobs even better around here and help us to meet that mission.
And just to add to that, I think also what happened when we hired a peer support person is it demonstrated to us that peer support is not a 9-to-5 job. And she was truly willing to look at what had to happen. And that really reflected in the rest of my staff. So all of a sudden I have staff who can't meet a youth, at 7 in the morning before they go to school. And they were coming in because they started seeing her do this and reaching out and seeing how successful she was at engagement. It created an opportunity for them to learn from her also.
And Kathy, that's a great point, because I have my youth staff are the same way, that, you know, they don't always work within that, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, mentality. I've had them come and do special events on weekends.
Yes.
I know we do an after dark program for, we have what's called the RC After Dark that Amanda started, and it engages the young adults who are at the local colleges who maybe have some struggles with mental health, and gives them a place to come here after hours to, once or twice a month to do fun events, but to be there for support to one another. So, seeing her and seeing other staff do these things after hours and on weekends, it's just, it's very inspirational.
I can't count the number of days I was leaving at 6:30 and they're out there playing Uno with the youth. And I'm like, go home. But they were still here. And sometimes other staff engaged also at that time. So it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't just her. She was setting an example, and other staff were also able to better engage with the youth, because now, they're all together at one time.
Thank you both. Another question from Heather Wells, and this is directed at Kathy, is how did you sustain your services post-grant?
Well, we sustained our services even before post-grant. We started working with and talking with some of our youth about becoming peer support specialists, and did they want to. And while they were here, and Quanita was very instrumental in this also, while they were here still, do you want to start learning more about it? And we had several who were like, yes. And I think what we really saw was that it was important. And so it has been written into other grants since then. I currently have a peer support person now. I've hired 2 of our young people to work in our bakery now. We've changed a lot of things we're doing. So we are now looking at our young people as resources. And that's been the really biggest piece. When you talk about sustainability, quit looking at them as participants and clients. They are truly resources that are best for us to be able to work within the realms of the other participants we have here.
Yeah, I was going to add too that one of the things we do at the Recovery Center is we will adjust our budget. So like right now I've got 2 staff that are working through grants. And when it comes time for post-grant, we'll look at the outcomes that were achieved through the work that they were doing, and we'll do a couple things. Either we will rearrange our budget so that we can keep those successes moving forward. We'll reach out to potential grant funders to keep those grants going, or we'll reach out to our local mental health board and share with them, the impact this has had, share with them the results, and talk to them about potential contract change to kind of add the dollars we might need to keep, that positive impact going.
And Chris, you make a good point. Our local mental health board loves peer support. And so they have been a real big supporter and benefactor of us to be able to maintain and sustain having peer support here.
And ours as well. They've been a huge support.
One of the other things, though, that happened while we had the grant and Quanita was here was all of a sudden the other departments directors were coming to me saying, how can I get a peer support person in my department? And I'm like, you don't need a peer support person in your department. We have a peer support person for the whole agency. But what they saw, even though they may not have been in the same building we were in, was they saw the impact that she was having. And that alone was enough to help us to work towards sustaining this position and adding to this position.
Great, thank you both. And then it looks like Quanita had a question in the chat. Quanita, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure, I will do that. First, I want to start by saying, Kathy and Chris, I'm just so appreciative of your willingness to be champions for peer support and to just, give wonderful praise to your young adult peers. Specifically, Kathy, thank you so much. You always edified and build me up every day working with you. But you also have to give the acknowledgement to yourself that you are a supervisor that was willing to learn, to be malleable, to adapt, and to really invest into peer support. So my question to you all, Chris and Kathy, is how did you navigate the level of vulnerability in a supervisor role to be aware that this was an area that you had to educate yourself on and the agency?
Chris, you can start.
I think for myself, I've always been a very flexible, adaptive person. So, and when it comes to working with, youth peers, again, I've always kind of looked at it, a staff person is a staff person, or we're going to have to do some things a little bit differently, with someone who's younger. Yes, we might, we might have to give them some different opportunities. And really what I try to do is give them opportunities to shine, that I want them to get off on the right track when it comes to their work here at the center. So I really try to give them different opportunities. I know one young peer staff person we have works in our kitchen, and we had a big event with a picnic, and really kind of gave him the opportunity to shine with the skills he has when it comes to the kitchen work that he does. And the other young lady has a passion for just wanting to help others, and giving her an opportunity locally to work with Maslow's Army to try to help the homeless here in Cincinnati, and organizing a group of members and staff at the Recovery Center to go down and do that on weekends. So, my end, it was trying to think out of the box, be flexible and adaptive, and to try to play to the strengths of those staff coming in, but doing it within a way that it really doesn't change who I am or who we are as a center.
As I said before, I really, I was not planning on hiring anybody that was a peer support person. So a lot of mine was honestly through trial and error. And what I appreciated was, and I'll just give you an example. At one point in time, before I got more education and Quanita had just started, I gave her a caseload. I'm like, okay, you have this caseload of kids and you got to get them jobs, and I'm going to give you a small caseload now. But she came back to me and said, Kathy, through my training, this is what I need to be doing and how I need to be doing it. And holding on to this small caseload of kids is not going to be what I should, or the best way for me to do it. And so, like I said, a lot of mine was trial and error. But I wanted to make sure that what she did, I do this for all my staff, I want to make sure that what they do here is impactful enough that they also gain something from it. And I'm big on empowering my staff. I want them to have a voice, and I want them to have input. And she was no different than anybody else because she was staff. So I agree that it does have to be seamless, and anybody here is allowed the same rights and the same privileges as anybody else. But the biggest thing for me was that I sought it out because I wanted to learn more. I didn't want to be a barrier to anybody else, whether it was Quanita or the other people we now have who are either going through peer support or we've hired because they were really good people and we hired them in. So I don't want to create that for anybody. So I'm going to try and learn as much as I can so that as we evolve, this can just keep going on and on throughout the whole agency.
And the other piece I was going to add too is, it's, and this goes for all staff, but I think especially for our younger staff, is really trying to establish a rapport with them. I've really made it a point, especially with our young staff, to make sure I've got, a rapport developed with them so that they feel comfortable that if they're having troubles or struggling with something, that they know that they can come to myself, or they can come to me and I can try to point them in the right direction, or maybe have some other staff person who is, you know, more familiar or aware with what that struggle might be, try to help or assist them. So I think it's important to have that rapport with one another, and really working hard early on to establish that.
Thank you both. And we have a couple more questions in the chat box. Wilma is asking, what can be done to assist other provider agencies to understand the value of peer support?
You know, one of the goals that I've set for myself here locally, that it piggybacks a little bit off of trying to get, you know, employment for our youth peers, is to get not just youth peers, but peers in general, established on the board of directors of the different behavioral health organizations. You know, when I look at, I'm familiar with some of the boards and the makeup of them, and very seldomly do you see, you know, but a peer or two on them, and seldomly, if at all, do you see a young peer on there. And, you know, I think about the board of directors here at the Recovery Center, which is more than 51% peer-led. And we've had a youth individual who is just excelled on our board. You know, started out as a member, and he's now our vice president, and, you know, has led some of our meetings and just does a great job. And I think trying to get, you know, some of our peers involved at that higher level on a board of directors role could go a long way to, you know, opening the doors, you know, at the lower levels in the agency, and really try to open up some eyes to folks, and hiring more and more peers and getting more peers involved.
I think that to get other agencies to the point where they may accept peer support or accept peers in the roles of the employees that they have, is truly about finding that line of accepting the fact that this creates a different culture, and it's a culture that benefits whatever their job is. And so sometimes change is difficult and sometimes change is hard. And when you're talking about a large organization and you're trying to change the culture of a large organization, then it does sometimes become a challenge. But I think once they see the benefits to whoever it is they're serving and the benefits to their agency as a whole, you know, by having peer support, it has truly put the agency in a different place and a different role in our community even. So the acceptance of peer support and embracing it in your agency, put your agency in a different level. And that might be a good place to be, whether it's funding wise, whether it's because the community then calls on you when there's issues in the community and they need someone to sit on a board, or they need someone to be on a panel, or they need someone to be the presenter, then your agency is then looked at community-wide, not just under the four walls that you're operating in.
Thank you both. Those are great answers. We have another question from Holly Jones in the chat, which is, what kind of data did you collect?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, it's what kind of data did you collect? If you collected anything around peer support.
So for us at the Recovery Center, we collect data through the Ohio outcome surveys. So through those surveys, we're able to collectively look at how we compare to all the other organizations here in Hamilton County. So even though we're a little peer-run center, we can compare ourselves to the other behavioral health organizations in Hamilton County to see how our members are doing as a whole, whether it be with symptom recognition, you know, with their finances, with how they feel about where they live, et cetera. But then we can also break that down to an individual level, where if we want to, we can look at one particular member's information and see, are they excelling or in certain areas, or are they having a struggle in certain areas? So we utilize that data and collect that data, and then we can tie that data back to whether it be with our peer staff and some of the folks that, maybe they're working within a group, we can actually look at the data of those individuals who, for example, maybe are participating in a weekend volunteer activity that we've put together, and to see is it making a difference in their surveys that they are being more engaging and active in their community. So that's probably the biggest piece of data that we do. We also do a variety of just different surveys and really try to work to get feedback from our members, whether it's on health and wellness or other areas, because we want to hear from them, because we want to know what their needs are, and are we effectively meeting those needs. And then we can take that data and use it when I'm writing a grant, and I can say in a grant that, hey, look, in Hamilton County, this little organization, Recovery Center of Hamilton County, scored better than all the other organizations in quality of life and symptom management. That goes a long way to making the grant that I write stand out. That can bring in dollars that could continue, a peer staff position or add another peer staff position to the work we're doing.
A lot of the data that we collected is anecdotal. The neat thing about it is that our peer support person actually developed her own tracking system and who she was seeing and how often she was seeing them. She would also report on the things that she was working with those people, so that if for some reason she might not be here, she would share that information with the staff that was here so that they could help support that young person if they came in during the time she wasn't here. We also, as an agency though, we do a satisfaction survey for all the services that we provide here. And so what we were seeing with the peer support is that youth who were truly engaged in participating in peer support were highly satisfied with that service and were often the ones who we saw engaging the most. They were often the ones who, without being asked or directed to do so, were in our agency or were in our building doing the work in terms of volunteering. They were here supporting us. We've had youth who even worked in Lindy's Bakery and didn't get paid for it because they just wanted to be over here. And those youth that were engaging in peer support. It does show easily the connection they had with the peer supporter who was in a whole nother building. Now, granted, they only had to walk across a parking lot, but a lot of them wouldn't even do that. But those who did came regularly. And that's what we wanted, was to see engagement, because that engagement allowed them to have some exposure to different things in different places that helps them to progress out of Daybreak, which is our goal.
Great, thank you both. Next question is, what is your method for posting or recruiting for peer supporters?
I've never posted for one. Like I said, I talked to the case manager for the first time. And what we have been doing since then is we have been looking at the participants that we work with here, those while they're participating here. And we've been exposing them to peer support so that they can understand more about it. They get a better feel for it. And then if they want to, and we can, we encourage them to go on in the whole training avenue of becoming a peer support person. And we've done that with several of our youth. And we don't always just start here at Daybreak. We have other opportunities in our community, some within walking distance, where they can just go and observe and be a part of that so that they can get a better feel for what they may be doing if they choose to follow through with this. But we generally look internally. We're not opposed to going outside. We just haven't had that or had the need for that opportunity.
And at the Recovery Center, we do some of both. We'll do internal postings, but we'll also do external postings where I will send a job description or a job flyer to the different mental health organizations here locally in Hamilton County, as well as reaching out to some of the counseling therapists that we know here to post openings that we have. And then we'll also, depending on, if we find the person through that, that's great. If not, we might even reach out beyond our county to some of the other organizations, peer organizations locally in Southwest Ohio to try to fill whatever job it might be.
Great, thank you both. And I don't currently have any more questions. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and ask a question, or any other questions in the chat? I'll give people a second to think. I'm not seeing anything right now. So do we want to, running a little early, but if the three of you would like to make any closing statements?
I guess my biggest closing statement would just be around the fact that peer support in any organization, and a lot of times people think in terms of social service settings, but I have learned quickly by some of the youth that we are serving here that they bring a whole nother round to some of the jobs that they are in. And so I encourage them to do peer support because they don't even recognize that's what they're doing. And if they had that structure and the education around peer support, I think they could go much further. But it is truly something that will allow them, if they choose to do so, is to gain some transferable skills that can be taken anywhere. So I am a real big proponent of really letting them see how impactful they can be regardless of their age or their situation or where they came from or their background or whatever else is going on with them. I just want them to empower themselves so that what they take with them is going to be useful and can really contribute to whatever lot in life they choose.
I just got three quick points I wanted to kind of finish up with. One is peer support is just a phenomenal complementary service to, clinical work and other work that is done out there. And I know a lot of times peer support does not get the credit I believe it deserves. And just truly want to emphasize, especially if there's providers out there watching, that it is just so impactful and just an incredible complement to the work that's done in the community. And then just wanted to add when it comes to, to staff as a whole, but in particular for young peer staff, as a supervisor, making sure that, if you're a supervisor out there, setting clear goals and expectations for that staff person just goes a long way to helping them to be successful in the role that they have in your organization. And the third thing I was going to add to that was just, and I do this with all the staff, but give them the opportunity to make mistakes. I make mistakes personally all the time. I learn more from the mistakes I make in life, and just, be there to support them when maybe things don't go right. Because, I know that, my staff as a whole, that, we're going to take whatever mistake we might make, learn from it, and grow and do much better.
Thank you. Yeah, we're getting a comment from Crystal in the chat box saying that she feels that one of the biggest challenges with agencies is separating the differences between peer support and case management. Dr. Delman, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I think, what helps other organizations move forward is a combination of kind of some straightforward information, such as what we did in the toolkit, but also the experience of people who have succeeded in like situations, whether it be a clinic or another kind of program. And it's important, I think, for the state, if they have the state's making a great effort at getting the message out that this job is important. And I think to continue to do that and support the entities that are doing it well. And as you're doing, provide TA to the others. You know, it really depends on the CEO in the end or the program directors as to whether they're open to implementing this. And I think any one of us wants support from the top if we're trying to introduce some sort of innovation, which what this really is. We're still learning about how to do it. So I encourage you to continue to do what you're doing and offer your support to other programs or organizations. Again, you may want to look at my toolkit. I really try to address everything, and you know, I think you're moving in the right direction.
So much. And yeah, we have linked that toolbox in the chat box, and we will send that out again with the slides. We're also getting some more comments about challenges that, since we have time, I think maybe we can touch on. Crystal, did you want to elaborate on the challenge that you brought up?
So I know that peer support is important because the person is, you know, able to relate with the client on a different level to support them through the recovery. But one of the things that I think is that might be a hindrance for some agencies is that having peer supporters could take the place of the case management team, or and the other thing is the documentation. Like, how do you separate the differences in documenting because they're so closely related, the services? So it's just a thought.
I can try and speak to that as best I can with my agency. And that is a true challenge in that case managers or whoever else is in the agency doing certain things, whether it's a therapist, we have employment specialists, we have engagement specialists. But what really we found that worked the best was a true education of the role of the peer support person, because the peer support person may look like sometimes that they're doing something that a case manager would do, or they may be doing something that a case manager asked them to support them with. But the biggest thing we did here, and what I'm really working towards still here, is embracing that peer support person to show that that person has a role that is separate. And it may look like yours, and it may be a little piece of yours, but that role truly is separate because their education is different, their experiences are different, and they're out there trying to expose those participants to that. And so to me, sometimes that goes beyond just the case management pieces. And I'm not demeaning case management in any way, but it does, because in becoming a peer, we're talking about true disclosure of themselves. And so it takes on a different meaning for our youth. And when our case managers saw that and could better understand that, then it did work better, because then they were able to work together. And that's what we're really working toward now with the peer support people we have here, is to make sure we maintain connections so that we are supporting each other in the positions and the roles we have.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's not easy though. I'm not gonna lie. It's not easy.
So can I get your contact information so maybe we could talk?
My contact information? Sure. I don't know. How do I give my contact information? I don't.
You want to put it in the chat, like your email maybe?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And then another challenge that Ashley Miller brought up is people want to become peer supporters but feel that they can't, since they have a lot of fines and fees to get off probation to get their certificate, to get their certification. And then she asked if there are any tools to help to overcome this.
I address this in the toolkit. I can send you the right pages. But first of all, you know, a criminal record or even probation doesn't necessarily disqualify someone from a job, such as if it's for a forensic peer specialist. And yet, you know, if the provider hiring puts out there that we're going to check your record, that's going to scare people away, even if they work through the process. And then, according to the federal law, although it's not adhered to so much, you know, the conditioning hiring on a criminal record is discriminatory, racial discriminatory, because it has a disparate impact on African Americans. So the Department of Justice kind of recognized this as a problematic. So what they suggest is that when you interview somebody, you go through the process, and it's only at the end that you would ask them about the criminal record. And that's the way the provider should be doing it. From our end, there are ways of looking in, first of all, getting the record and seeing if we can expunge it. It might be expungible if it's not a big deal, remove it from the record, or if we can otherwise block it. And you need to know what the rules and regulations are in Ohio for doing this. But I think anybody who's providing job support or employing should go out of their way to help a person clear their record, or otherwise work with human resources to make sure that the person gets through it. You know, the other thing about this job is, you know, if you work with human resources, you want to create the job for the peer specialist. And it may be that people have a criminal record, but that's part of the lived experience. You don't want to disqualify people from, you know, some people get a record because of discrimination, or they're caught, and other people are getting away with things all the time. It's a sad thing that when we discriminate based on just basic fines or things like that. But we should be able to help people. In the toolkit, there's a section on it, and I think I linked to several other websites that I'll check on what you can help someone do about it.
And from the financial side of it, at the Recovery Center, we don't pay any of the fines somebody might have, but we do cover the cost for some of our individuals to go ahead and get the background checks and some of the costs that may be incurred by trying to become a peer recovery supporter.
Thank you. We have Eric Kemp is raising his hand. Eric, did you have a question or a comment?
Well, no, I just like to say that, you know, sometimes with the case managers, the stigma between them and a peer supporter kind of gets sick sometimes, because they get aggravated like we're trying to do their job, but actually all we're doing is helping them do their job, you know, helping them get the things that they want out of their client. And we work with a peer supporter, works with the client a lot more than the case manager does, because we're with them more often than the case manager. And all us peer supporters are trying to do is help that man get the life that he wants to get. And sometimes the caseworker gets upset thinking we're trying to do her job. And I don't think that's fair, them thinking that, because all we're doing is trying to be an extension of the caseworker to help their client achieve everything that they possibly can, to have a better life and to have the exact same life that we have. Because with me, I believe that helping a peer supporter helps me just as much as I'm trying to help him. And actually, I think he helps me more, you know, because it's a grim reminder where I don't want to be, and I should be a reminder of where he wants to be. So I just think that sometimes the case manager gets overly, I don't know how to put it exactly, but I've seen them get mad at me because they act like I'm trying, like I'm overtaking their job or something. But all I'm trying to do is do my best to help that client have a better life and help the case manager with what they want. You know what I mean? Instead of, I'm not trying to do her job, I'm just doing my own job. Do you understand what I'm trying to say, kind of?
Yes.
I do.
And it gets kind of aggravating sometimes, because, you know, I'm just doing my best to help that guy have the exact same life that I have, which is a clean, productive, loving, caring, compassionate human being. The person that, you know, that he was always meant to be in the beginning. And it's upsetting sometimes that, but we're not trying, peer supporters are not trying to take or do their job. We're with them a lot more. Caseworker sees them once or twice a week. Some peers that I work with, I see them every single day, you know? So I don't know, it's just weird that I just don't think that some caseworkers should be that way with us, and they try to get rid of that kind of stigma, because it's not true. We're just trying to help them help their client. So.
And I think that's where job descriptions can be so important that you know, that case managers hopefully are aware of, you know, the role in the job that the peer is trying to do, and the peer is aware of the description of the case manager, so that where there is overlap, hey, there's a mutual understanding that we're all in this together in this overlap area, but that, you know, a case manager may have some specific separate duties from the peer, just as the peer worker may have some specific separate duties from a case manager. And I think if you know, folks are aware of you know, the descriptions and the commonalities and the differences, I think it can go a long way to, you know, bridging any gaps that there may be on case management teams when it comes to having case managers and peers all working together.
And one of the things I want to commend Chris with, and even my own CEO, is it does start from the top. And the culture change starts from your administration. So if your administration is bringing this in, the education and the training that needs to happen as a whole for everyone in the agency needs to be supported by the CEO, so that the rest of the organization sees that this is how the CEO is working to make the culture change in their agency.
Right, because I feel that all that I'm really doing is like being the caseworker's right-hand man, trying to help get their client to do what they need to do so they don't get in trouble and they build a productive life. And sometimes the caseworker gets mad, you know what I mean? Trying to, what are you trying to do my job? I'm not trying to do your job. I'm just doing everything I can to help the guy make sure he gets his life back and get the things he needs and wants out of his recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm just letting off a little steam there. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We have a couple more people with raised hands, but I wanted to point out a couple things in the chat around employing peers who may have a criminal background. Ohio, we also have a CQE available. And then Lisa Shaffa explained a little bit about what that means, a certificate of qualified employment that someone with a criminal background can obtain. And then John Delman also noted the pages of the toolkit that discuss how to help someone with a criminal record.
And I'm emailing a link specifically for Ohio on what it covers with the ban the box. Ban the box meaning you don't have a box on the initial application asking if the person has a criminal record.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to put it towards the end. I'm putting a link in right now for that. I think this is right.
And the next person who had their hand raised is Ashley Miller.
So my question goes more, our agency is willing to hire somebody with a criminal background. That's not an issue at all. My understanding is just that to get your peer certification in the state of Ohio, you have to be off probation. And we work with a lot of clients that are in the criminal justice system. And the ones who express interest typically have been in like the drug court system or things like that. And they end up being on probation for an extended period of time. And a lot of that has to do with those fines and fees. And so they're not able to get that certification. And I don't know, we're working to become Medicaid billable at this point, and I just don't know what, if we're able to do that if someone's not certified, and kind of what those, that might look like for somebody who is still on probation, if that helps kind of clarify that question a little bit more.
I know in the state of Ohio that you do have to be certified in order to bill Medicaid. That is one of the requirements.
Hi, this is Zandaya. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I think it was Ashley who was speaking. You're correct that individuals have to be cleared from all sanctions prior to becoming a peer supporter. What we would recommend individuals do is to work with their support and their treatment team to talk with their probation officers, or in some cases parole officers. We've had individuals get letters of support to help them get off of probation so that they can become a peer supporter and they can get employment. But currently in our administrative code, you're correct, individuals have to be released from all sanctions before they can become peer supporters or go through the process of becoming certified to become a peer supporter.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if there was any, what other people's suggestions might be to help those people, because we've had people with significant time being off out of the drug court system and time in recovery, but they accrued so much, especially because of those like specialized courts with their testing fees and probation fees and all of these different things, that it's gotten so high. And then with the record, they can't find regular employment a lot of the time, which is something we're working on building also. I wasn't sure if anybody had any ideas for how to help them with that, but thank you.
This is Eric. I was told too, if you look on the application for peer support, if they have an X amount of different kind of charges, they don't allow them to become peer supporters as well with certain different charges. I read all the way through the charges, anything violent or any kind of violent charges or anything like that, they don't allow it for a reason. I don't know exactly why, but and if a peer supporter wants to work at the same place that he graduated from, he has to be away from there at least a year or better before they'll allow him to work back at the same place he just graduated from. Because that's what I did. I worked for OhioMHAS and I had to wait a year after I graduated before I could go back and help being a peer supporter. But I had to be free and clear all my charges before I could even do that. So. Sorry.
You're fine. Thank you all for those comments. I'm getting another comment from Lisa that says, once they get the approval from DRC, they need to take the CQE application and file it with the court they reside in, not where they were prosecuted in. So just a little more detail there. Moving on, the next person I saw who had their hand up is Talia Holmes.
Hi, all. My question was, do you guys feel as if organizations as well as PCSAs would be more comfortable and confident if the peer supporters were backed by a national organization, kind of like how their social workers are with the NASW?
That's a great question, and I'm for myself personally, I don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily require that there be, a national backing. I mean, clearly, I don't think it would hurt, but I don't think that would necessarily, if I'm looking at, hiring someone, exclude them if there was not a national backing.
I personally don't. I'm not a peer support person. I think that would be a really good question to ask a peer support person, but I think that anytime you have standards that you're going by, peer supporters already have that. If you have qualifications you're going by, the peer support already has that. Would it be enhanced if there was some type of national organization that supported that? I can't answer that, but I think John would be better at that than I would.
There are several organizations that do this and try to set standards. One of them is Mental Health America. They have, and I can send links, and the other is the Association for Peer Supporters, and that's pretty much what they do. So I'll get those links and I'll send them out.
Thank you. And it looks like Quanita put a link in the chat for the National Association of Peer Supporters.
Yes, good.
Next person who has their hand up is Joyce Weddle. Joyce, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I must have hit it twice. My question has to do with what methods are used to train agencies, administrative support staff about the peer supporters role. Sometimes I've talked with people who said, like their agency, that sometimes the administrative staff, the front office staff, the other people involved in the process, perhaps judge the peer supporters as, you know, their role not being as important kind of thing. And maybe because some of them were former clients or whatever. How do you address that? Because I don't think it's productive for the team process, and I think that it's actually detrimental a lot of times. So how do we get the other people on the team to treat the peer supporters with the same respect that we all want ourselves to be treated with?
Again, from my perspective, it has to start at the top, and then it becomes exposure to the peer supporter and what their role is, and training around that role, and the understanding and I really believe that when other departments and other staff start seeing that benefit, then it just kind of like happens by osmosis. But it does take some time to do that. There's some ramp time, especially with people who may have been at the agency for a while. You know, those are usually the ones that sometimes have the harder chance of changing. But I think that the training, the exposure to that peer support person, and the support that peer support person has to have from administration and their immediate supervisor and anybody else around them that is supporting them is really valuable in helping to bring it about as a whole in an agency.
I would also say that because I just feel like the team process is so important all the way around, because there are going to be times when people's roles cross over, whether it's a peer supporter or an employment specialist or a case manager or care manager. And I think that the more you have a team process, the more you own that together and you don't go at us and them kind of process. So I agree with Kathy that just really important to make sure you have all the people on the team, you know, understanding what the role is and being supportive of one another, regardless of education or experience or whatever.
And I was going to add in there too. I mean, I'm going back, you know, probably 15 or so years ago when, you know, the whole concept of, you know, recovery and individuals can and do recovery or can and do recover. And you know, the organization I was at the time, you know, they really embraced the notion of recovery and really were ahead of the curve when it came to having a more recovery focused when it came to how they were interacting and how they were handling situations with the peers that they served. And I kind of think we're at a point now in 2020 where, you know, we take that next step with kind of the cultural shift when it comes to peer support and really trying to get organizations, and like Kathy had mentioned, you know, starting at the top. And when the leadership talks about how important peer support is and how important it is to embed peer support workers into this team here or in that service there, when you hear that over and over, like, you know, we did 15 years ago when it came to recovery, you'll start to see a cultural shift within an organization. But it really comes down to, I think, starting at the top and getting that word and that consistent message out about the importance of peer support and really trying to make a difference and get those individuals in those jobs embedded within an organization.
Thank you. And it looks like we're just about out of time. So I think that's all the questions that we had. I think we answered everything. Elise, if you could switch back to the PowerPoint. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to thank all of our panelists in this panel and the one in the morning. It was very educational for everyone. I think everyone really enjoyed it. So lots of positive comments in the chat. So thank you so much for being here and for helping us moderate these conversations. And just to review our CEU information, it is available for social workers, mental health counselors, prevention professionals, chemical dependency counselors, and psychologists. And it can also be used towards your peer support certification. So please be on the lookout for the from Jolene Thomas. You should be getting that, I believe in the next few days from Jolene Thomas. And you'll have to fill out that evaluation with your license number in order to get those credits. The next slide, please.
Even as a peer supporter?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
You have to have your number to get it for a peer supporter too, or?
I
don't think there's a number on our license.
Laura, Laura, I can answer that. Hi, this is Jolene. When you get the evaluation, there'll be a little area where it says to write your license number. If you can just write in there that you're a peer supporter, I can still send you a certificate. Just
okay,
so I think it counts towards your certification hours.
Okay, so you're going to send an email with that?
Yes.
Because all I have is my phone, so I'll be able to sign on the phone.
There's a little box like to fill in with the license number, so I hope that you would be able to do it on your phone. I can't say for sure.
Yeah, I've been able to sign on my phone before. I just was making sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And just Jolene, just as a clarification, peer supporters, when they are certified, they are assigned a certification number, which is located on the certification.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And then I also wanted to add, in terms of contact information, if you need further information about anything in this training, we are going to put in the chat box the email address for the Recovery Supports Office and also the email inbox for the Bureau of Children, Youth, and Families. So if one of you could put that in the chat, I'll do the.
So what, it'll be a couple of days before we get the email?
Jolene, did you have the answer to that?
Yes, you will be getting your evaluation in the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Sorry, did you guys say how many CEUs? I didn't hear that part.
It's actually a total of 7. We had hoped for 7.5, but there was a change in the agenda on the first day, which brought it down from 3.5 hours to 3.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
You guys have a great day. Thank you.
Also, Laura, there was a question in the chat box about is there a cost to post a position on Ohio Peers? There is not a cost.
Okay, thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the final one. This might be the final one. I believe that is everything in terms of housekeeping. I'm going to turn it over to Wilma Townsend for a few wrap-up remarks.
Okay. First of all, I want everyone to know that this has been a collaborative effort within the department between the Bureau of Recovery Supports and the Bureau of Children and Youth and Families. And the reason for that, peer support fall up under recovery supports, but it's real important for us in the children's area to make sure that peer support, that people understand that peer support for young people can be just as critical and make them and their families to be more successful. So that's why we collaborated in bringing this to you today. I want to thank our team from both of those offices. And I also want to thank the Center for Innovative Practice, because they were a big help in being the host of this for us today because of some platform problems. We would not have been able to been successful in doing this without their help. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for participating in this. What some wonderful discussions and questions. Hopefully you got a lot of information out of this. One of the things I heard towards the end was a lot of people asking about their agencies and what they can do for people to be trained. One of the places that I had gone to had put together a checklist for providers to, before they would hire a peer, things that they needed to do. I'll make sure we put that checklist up on, because there's no link to it, but I'll put it on as part of the PowerPoint when we post it on the wraparound website. So, but hopefully you got out of it and understood how important it is for employing young people as peers to assist you in getting your job done, and not see it as something that they're in competition. They bring a very, very unique skill that can assist individuals and their families to be able to be better. And anytime we can do that, we need to be doing it, and we need to be helping folks. But we have to do it as a team, because if more we divide it, the less we'll get done and be successful. Thank you all for participating again in this today. And have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.